art, about the business of being an artist, the development of yourself as an artist, or mindset, or anything like that. Now, I'm doing these AMAs to celebrate the launch of my new book, which you can see behind me. And just so I'm thrilled with how it's going now. We've hit bestseller on, I think, 3 different categories on Amazon, and it's gotten 33 reviews, all 5 star. So if you are interested in making a living from your art, I can't recommend enough getting the book and getting it now, because today's the last day of our book launch special. So right now you can get the book at a discounted price. It's $2.99 for the ebook, and it's $9.99 for the paperback. That's going up. The ebook is going to be $9.99, and I think the paperback is going to be like $14 or $15.99, something like that, as of tomorrow. So today's your last chance to get that. But not only that, you also get some bonuses. So at the back of the book, there's a page, bonuses page, and there's a website URL on there. You can go to that URL and give your name and email, and that'll allow you 2 things. You'll get my course, Creating Your Plan for Success, which we were selling when we were selling on its own for $199. You'll get that absolutely free, and you'll also get access to a live Zoom call with me, which will be sort of like this, but in the Zoom calls, which we do with a group, you can actually share images of your paintings. I can critique work, and you can actually speak to me. For today, you're going to have to put your questions into the chat. So you can put your questions into the chat, and I'll answer them. My son Cameron is kind of hosting and producing the meeting, so he'll be feeding me the questions as they come up. But before we get into the questions, I just thought I would really like to start with about a 15-minute kind of talk on what I believe it takes to become a successful artist. And hopefully this may answer some of your questions, or it may provoke some more questions. So, because people are always asking me, like, what's the secret? What do you need to do to become a successful artist? Well, the answer is very simple, but to do it is not easy. The answer is you need to be able to consistently create great art with a unique voice. And that's it. If you can do that, making a living as an artist actually is very easy. But we have to unpack that a little bit, because we need to define some of these things. So when we talk about great art, what do we mean by great art, and who gets to decide? Is it critics? Is it university professors? Is it gallery owners? Whatever. So to understand that, you need to understand something about the art world. And that is that there's not just one unified art world. It's like a bunch of different art villages. And we all know about the villages dominated by academia and postmodernism, and a lot of public galleries. So that's like a banana duct taped to the wall with a meat dress. And in that village, it's all about what the artist was thinking or feeling, what's their intent, what's their concept. And the gatekeepers there are museum critics, gallery critics, people who write about art, that kind of thing. That's not the village that I live and work in. And everything that I talk about is in the village that I call commercial sales. And so in this village, this is the village where real people buy an artist's work to hang in their home or their place of business, usually. But it's actually individuals that are purchasing the work to hang in their home. And that is usually through a variety of ways, whether it's commercial art galleries. And so again, these are galleries that make their living by selling artist work. It's through art festivals, it's online, it's via social media, but it's actually real people buying work that they are going to hang in their home. And who decides what is great art in this village is the public. The art buying public decides what is great art. So we judge great art in this village not by what the artist felt or meant or was trying to convey, but what is the impact on the viewer. And what we want our art to do is to stop people in their tracks, take their breath away, engage them as they're drawn in, and their eye engages in a visual dance with the painting. And then the painting inspires that biblical word of coveting. And I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about. If you've ever been anywhere and seen a painting that you fall in love with, you just really want to pick it up off the wall and take it home with you, because it makes you feel something that you really, really enjoy. And you want to be able to feel that whenever you walk into the room and see it. So that's how we define great art in our village, work that does that. Well, here's the thing. in the village of commercial sales where the public buys art, despite everything that's gone on in the art world in the last 50, 60 years since postmodernism first raised its head, the vast majority of the public still values all of the things that have been important in art since the Enlightenment up until the 1950s. So things like skill, beauty, mastery, emotional engagement, that is what they value most. So what we need to do to create great art is we need to create work that inspires those emotions, but even that's not enough. It has to be done with a unique voice. And I'll get into why that is. And that means that your work is different than all the other work out there. People immediately recognize when they see it that you did it. But the work also has to require skill and mastery to complete it. And if it doesn't have skill and mastery, then you're never ever going to make a good living. And I will give you an example of that, what I mean. Like you can create some really, really beautiful work just doing fluid acrylic pours. And you can take a weekend workshop. They'll teach you how to pour fluid acrylic on gold foil matte board, put two pieces together, pop them off. It's absolutely beautiful. But the problem is anyone can learn to do it in a weekend. And so even if you do this work and start selling it, what you're going to find is someone else will do it and will do it cheaper. And you'll have someone 3 booths down from you at the next art show doing the exact same thing, but undercutting your prices. And then it becomes a race to the bottom. So you need to have work that requires mastery and demonstrates mastery, because that makes it so much more difficult for other people to copy you. And then ideally, you want to have some form of your creativity that allows you to create work that no one else can create. And so how do we get there? How do we get to that place where you develop your unique voice? Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to master the skills and the concepts. So things like drawing, things like composition, things like color theory, light and shadow, perspective, atmospheric perspective, all of those types of things, because your work needs to demonstrate mastery, and we know the public appreciates mastery. But once you've done all that, then the search begins for your unique voice. What do you have to say that is different and special compared to all the other artists out there? And I've come across a process that I think really, really works well. And it's also what people use in music, right? You hear a lot of people that are very, very famous and successful in music, and they talk about all the influences they had growing up of different types of music. That's what we want to cultivate as an artist. And what you want to do is identify other artists whose work you really, really love. And then you want to kind of dissect them. Like, what is the filter that they kind of have between what they see and what they create, right? Van Gogh was all strokes of broken color. If you look at Chuck Close, he created these little abstract squares with just looked like abstract shapes, but when you stand back, it resolves itself into a very, very, very lifelike image. So you need to think about what's their filter, and then you want to master the techniques and the process so that you can kind of paint like them, because you're trying to absorb all of the knowledge and creativity that they've already created. And the way you do this, if you're starting out, it's actually okay to copy another artist's paintings, as long as you're only doing it as a learning exercise and for fun. You can't post it as your own work, you can't sell it, you can't do anything with it, but it's okay to copy another artist's work. You'll see students in the Louvre, art students, copying other artists' work. But then the next stage is to try to create your own work, but in the style of that particular artist. And then once you've kind of done that, then you look for another different influence. And then you do the same thing. And you do that for a number of different artists. And then what you do is now you go, okay, now I'm just going to paint something that I want to paint, but I'm going to take a variety of the things that I've learned from all of these different artists I've used as influences, and I'm going to try to put them together in my own way. And when you do that, you need to understand the 3 different modes of painting, which are process, practice, and product. And practice, we all pretty much understand, right? That's like doing a sketchbook, or doing life drawing classes, or just practicing watercolor techniques on a piece of scrap paper. Product is where you just stick with the skills, knowledge, competencies that you have, that you are competent and confident in. And if you do that, you should hit kind of the bar, whatever the highest level of work that you do is. But the problem is you don't grow. You'll just stay there. And so that's where process mode comes in. And process mode is where we're trying things that we've never done before. We're stepping outside of our comfort zone. But the important thing to understand when you're in process mode is there's a very good chance that the painting will fail. And that's okay. And so the first thing you need to do when you're trying something you've never done before is give permission to the painting to fail, because the whole goal of process mode is to learn, not only to learn what works, but to learn what doesn't work, learn what to do next time, learn what not to do next time. And we often learn as much or more from our failures as we do from our successes. But here's the other thing about process mode is often that's where we have breakthroughs, right? That's where we'll have a painting all of a sudden that's a huge leap ahead of anything we've done before. Or it might actually just be an area in the painting where you just go, wow, I really love what's going on there. And it's like, okay, well, I'm going to focus on using that in the next painting. And what eventually will happen, again, no telling how long this will take, but doing this and cycling between process mode, practice mode, and product mode, what happens is every time you step into process mode, you learn more. And so when you come back to paint in product mode, your skills and your knowledge and your creativity and your experience, the four things that go to make up your talent, all of those things are now higher because you have more experience, you've pushed your creativity, you've learned, you've gained more knowledge, and you've gained more skill. So continually cycling through those things will allow your product mode work to keep getting better and better and better. And then eventually what happens is you have that aha moment where you create a painting where you absolutely love the process, you love the work, and when the public sees it, they go gaga over it as well. And then that could be your voice. The reason most artists fail is they stop searching for that voice. They get to the point where they're just painting reasonably competent, reasonably appealing paintings that are very similar to a lot of the other stuff out there. And then they try to make a career out of marketing that work. The key is you do not stop until you reach that point where you are creating work with great work so that the public is reacting to it. And the only reaction that counts is them getting out their wallets to buy. And you love the work. And also importantly, you love the process. Because once you kind of stumble upon that voice, and again, you don't find it, it kind of finds you. Once you get there, you are going to be required to do a lot of this work because the demand, the world is not shy once you develop that voice that they love. So that's why it's very important that you are always kind of following things that you love as well as what the public love, because you don't want to be spending your life cranking out work where you don't like the process. So it's very important that you love the process as well. And so that's basically all of my philosophy in there in terms of how you go about getting to that point where you're creating great work with a unique voice. And once you're doing that, then we just have all kinds of business opportunities and solutions and strategies to apply. But until you've found that, you don't have a business problem, you have an art problem. And there are no business solutions that can fix an art problem. And in my book, that's what I go through. The first half of the book is actually giving you detailed, actionable things you can do to master those skills and actually develop that unique voice. As well as the business side of how you can still be selling while you're on that path to that unique voice. And then really, once you've done that, how you can actually create a livable income from your art. So anyways, that's the start. And now it's time for your guys' questions. And so if you hear me talking to someone, I have my son Cameron in my ear, but you guys can't hear him. So Cameron, do we have any questions? So he's going to put them up on the screen. Okay, so there's a question, and Cameron, can you make the question stay up a little longer? I think you can set the time. So there's a question saying, I'm a blacksmith. I have a really big problem finding a workshop or forge to work in. A lot of safety, like hot work, soot and grime. Don't think anyone wants me there or to rent to me. I can't help you there. I don't know anything um, about running a blacksmith forge or whatever. So yeah, I mean that's actually a question in terms of finding the studio space. I mean the best thing that I could again, you're just gonna have to search it out, right? It's just like I don't know what answer you expect me to give you there because I don't know anything about being a blacksmith. The one thing I would do though is search to see if there are any other blacksmiths within a reasonable drive of your area who actually have like a blacksmith studio, forge, etc. And if you would be able to rent time in their studio or whatever. But yeah, like that's one of those things that, the answer might be you need to move. I don't know where you're living now, but you might need to move to a place where you have property in the country and build your own forge. It's like, I don't know. It's the one thing I'll tell you again, like being an artist, making a living from as an artist. Again, if you can create great work with unique voice, it's simple, but it's not easy. And often we have to make very difficult decisions. And often that might mean moving, might mean moving countries. If the country you live in doesn't really support the arts, it kind of is what it is, right? It's kind of like if you want to be a downhill skier and you live in the Bahamas, that's not going to happen if you're living in the Bahamas. And then the question just becomes, how badly do you want this to happen? And I'll tell you one thing, there are an awful lot, you can make a very, very good living as an artist. My best year, before I got into the teaching and everything else, in my best year, I made $280,000 just from the sale of my art. Since I've focused more on the teaching, that's gone down a little, but it's now starting to kind of get back up. Consistently, when I was just painting and selling my work through galleries, I was making over $200,000 a year. But there are a lot of other trades or jobs you could do to make that money a lot easier than being an artist. So deciding to become a professional artist is not, it's not because, oh, this is an easy way to make money. The only reason why you want to become a full-time professional artist is this is the thing that you want more than anything else in the world, and you are willing to do whatever it takes to succeed. It's much easier to become an accountant and make a lot more money than artists. It's a lot easier to become a lawyer, become a doctor. I mean, even a doctor, right? We know that it's a lot of school, but there's a guaranteed result at the end. After 10 years of kind of schooling and training, you're going to be making big money. We all know many successful doctors in our lives. How many successful artists do you know personally in your life? Not that many, right? So it is possible, but you've got to be willing to take on the difficult situations and overcome them. And it's just not easy. That's the one thing I'll tell you. It's not easy. The only reason to want to become an artist is that you want more than anything to get up every day and go and create your art. And there's only three ways to do it, right? You can win the lottery, you can marry a rich spouse who will support you, or you can find a way to actually create a living from it. But it's not like this is an easy way to get rich, just doing what you love and never doing the hard work or the hard questions. You got to make a lot of sacrifices, but it's worth it. But at the end of the day, you have to want this more than anything else in the world to have a chance at it. Okay, Cam, what's next? When you apply the darker red and prep for your paintings on your canvas, now that the quinacridone crimson is discontinued, what's the best color choice to use? Yeah, I get that question a lot because quinacridone is a color that was used in the auto industry for some of those really bright colors, and there was a lot of excess that went to art manufacturers, but it's very expensive to manufacture, and it's not worth it to manufacture it or process it just for the art supply, so you can't get it. But here's the thing. I use the quinacridone crimson just because it's kind of a deep, dark red, right? That's all you need, a deep, dark red, if you want to have the same sort of effect that I have. There is a not quinacridone, I think there's a permanent alizarin by Golden Acrylic that you can use. So like an alizarin crimson, I've got all kinds of fluid acrylic colors from when I used to play around with them. For now, I'm just using a naphthol red and I'm just mixing a little purple in with it on the canvas and then mixing it together. All you need is a deep dark red. That's it. If you have a bright red, you can add a little purple to it, or you can add a burnt umber to it, whatever. But it doesn't really matter the exact color. Mine, because now I'm mixing them myself because I just want to use up all these fluid acrylics I have, it's a little bit different every one. It doesn't really matter. You don't need the exact color, but there's a gold, and I can't remember the exact name, but it is a alizarin crimson. Okay, Cam, another one. How can you get the feeling of, oh, this can never happen for me? Oh, get over that feeling. Yeah, that's a really good thing. So we're talking about mindset here, right? Mindset is the very first chapter in my book because it is the most important thing about all of this. It doesn't matter how badly you want it. If you don't really believe it will happen, if you don't believe it's possible to happen, you'll never take the steps required to do it. And it's kind of funny. So Henry Ford is the one that made this, that came out with this statement, and they're using it now on Ford commercials, but they aren't even saying it was Henry Ford. They just said a famous man once said, whether you believe you can do something or can't do something, you are absolutely right. Right? If you believe you can't do it and it won't happen for you, you're right, it won't. If you believe it can, then it can. And I'll just go back to my own kind of story. I wanted to be an artist more than anything else in the world. I took commercial art in high school. I took graphic design in college. I came out of college at 19, kind of ready to take on the world. And after 2 years of entry level jobs that were just like soul sucking and mind numbing, and I thought I wanted to be an illustrator. And I was still just doing this entry level stuff. And I looked around and I saw other people who were more talented than I was. And so I just made the decision. I'm not talented enough to become a successful artist and make a good living and get to the doing the kind of work I want to do. So I gave up and I joined the Toronto Police Force. And then later in life, in my 30s, I, for the first time, was exposed to that whole idea of the growth mindset. And there's two different mindsets. The fixed mindset, which is what I had believed, was I'm just not talented enough, right? I believed that talent, some people got the fairy dust sprinkled on their head when they were born and they had it, and I didn't have it and was never going to get it. And then I came across this concept of the growth mindset, which says your ultimate talent is unlimited. Your talent is simply four things. It's the sum total of your skills, your knowledge, your experience, and your creativity. And all four of those things can be improved. And so when I look back, when I made that decision that I wasn't talented enough, I was right. I would have been more right if I just added the word yet. Anytime, and that is one of the most powerful words in the English language. Anytime you experience a self-limiting belief or a thought, right? I'm just not whatever, talented enough. I don't draw well enough. I don't understand color. I'm not creative enough. I'm not brave enough, whatever. Add the word yet on the end of that thing, on the end of that sentence, because all of this stuff can be improved and you can acquire those characteristics that you need. And when I first kind of heard this concept, I really didn't believe it. And part of me was a little mad because I thought, the person that was saying this was Harley Brown, who's a famous Canadian artist, very successful. And I thought, yeah, well, it's easy for you to say because you're one of those gifted people, right? And I'm sure there's some of you out there thinking, easy for you, Tim Packer, you're gifted. It's like, no, I was not gifted. I was not the best. I was at about the 70th percentile in every art class I ever took in my life. I was never the best in class. I've achieved a lot of talent now, but it's all been acquired over the years. But when I heard that concept, and part of me again thought, well, first of all, yeah, all the gifted people say that. They just say it was about hard work, but we know they had something special that we don't have. And I also thought, well, does that mean I could be living my dream now? If maybe I was just not persistent enough, because at this point I'd now been 15 years in the police force and given up on the dream of being an artist. But I thought, what if they're right? What if he's right? What if I really could become talented enough? So I just decided, well, I'm not going to make any big changes. I wasn't thinking about leaving my job or anything, but I thought I'm going to behave as though I believe it's true. And so I'm going to start really focusing on improving my art. I'm going to schedule my painting time. So I'm painting 3 times a week, and that comes first before anything else. And I'm going to start tackling those things that I know I'm weak on. I was the worst person in terms of composition, I think, of any artist that ever lived. And so I just kind of avoided it. And then I decided, no, I need to master this. So I started doing this, and I started getting books and working on developing my skills and improving. And it was crazy. In a year, guess what? I'd gotten a lot better. And then I started actually getting work into shows, and then I was winning some awards. And then within 3 or 4 years of that, my wife and I were talking about me leaving the police force to paint full time. And I did that. And then it was a struggle. I mean, that's why I wrote this book. It took me 5 years to get to the point where I was making $30,000 a year. I was able to take Brooke Cormier from just being a serious hobby painter who just graduated from university as a landscape architect to make $30,000 in her first year of painting full time, because I'd made a lot of mistakes during that time on my own, and I'd learned what I would have done differently. And then a bunch of my students have gone on to do the same thing. I don't know if you guys have seen Emily Valentine. She's another one of the first people to join my art academy. She is killing it now. She actually had success much greater than Brooks, kind of right out of the gate. But she tells about how she was watching the YouTube series with me and Brooke, and she was just so envious and thinking, "Oh, that could never be me. I could never do that." Now she's one of the artists that I brag about most, about taking these concepts and it being able to change her life. And she is doing amazing. She sells everything she paints through her social media, through her website. And last year, she won the People's Choice first prize at the Kellogg's Art Competition, came with a $50,000 check. And 4 years ago, she was watching these videos thinking exactly what you're saying. Well, I know that could never be me. And the thing is, it can be you. Now, it's not easy. You need to be willing to put in the work. You need to have 3 things. You need to have a passion for art. And by passion for art, it's not enough just that you love painting. You have to have an overwhelming, burning desire to master everything about painting. And then you also have to have the willingness and ability to learn. And you have to have the work ethic. You need to be willing to put in the work. And you need to be willing to put in the work for the things that you don't want to do, but you know you need to do to acquire the skills, concepts, whatever. If you have that, you will become a successful artist if you keep at it. But the key there is the first problem we have is an art problem. And so that you need to master the skills, master the concepts, then spend time pushing your creativity, seeking out influences. And you do that until you are creating that great work with a unique voice. You don't stop the journey until you get to that point. And that is why most artists are starving, because they stop it pretty good or really good, right? The village of starving artists is filled with a lot of really good artists. You need to get to great. And I already talked about how we define great. So I hope that answers that. Oh, one other thing I will say. So mindset is a choice. You can choose to believe that your ultimate potential is unlimited, or you can choose to believe that it's limited, and you can change. And I changed mine. I didn't even believe it, but what I would suggest is live your life for a year like you believe it, and you'll be amazed what happens. But the other thing that's really important to understand is the studies that they've done show that your mindset, in terms of how much you gravitate to the fixed mindset or the growth mindset, is the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So choose wisely. If you are hanging around with other people who are defeatists, who say, "Oh, you can't make a living from your art," or "The world doesn't appreciate art," and "Oh, it's all rigged. You got to be born into the right family. You got to have the contacts." If you're hanging around people that believe that, then that's going to be your mindset. That's going to impact you. If you're hanging around people who believe what I believe, but even more importantly, people who have actually gone and done it and are examples of how the growth mindset can change your life, then that will raise your boat as well. A raising tide kind of raises all boats. So spend time with people who have the growth mindset. And the really cool thing they've also discovered is spending time like this on virtually has almost the same impact as spending time in person. So it's like, who are you watching on YouTube, right? There are a lot of people out there who are very successful and very famous, who are like the cheerleaders for this whole idea, the growth mindset, and your ability to achieve whatever you want. watch those people instead of spending your time watching Game of Thrones or any of the other stuff out there. But if you spend time with people doing that, it will impact you. What is the difference between style and voice? There isn't any really. It's the same sort of thing. The reason I like to say an a unique voice, because people get that when it comes to music, right? Like, there are people out there who are incredibly talented technically, but they haven't pushed the creativity into it. And you see them on The Voice and on American Idol. You know what I mean? People get out there and they sing and they're just absolutely brilliant. But there are a ton of singers who are absolutely technically brilliant, but they don't have anything that kind of separates them from the others that are there. But then you look at artists where someone like, Willie Nelson, Bruce Springsteen, Rod Stewart, Frank Sinatra, Ed Sheeran, whatever, right? They have something unique. As soon as you hear that, that's is that Ed Sheeran song, right? Or Nickelback. I know a lot of people hate Nickelback. I love Nickelback. But it's like I can be listening on the radio and a new song comes out and I just know that's Nickelback. And it's like, that's what you need to have, right? And so that voice comes through in your work as well. But yes, style is the same as voice. So they're the same thing. But if you think about it like music, that's kind of the same thing, right? So that's why it's important not just to develop the unique skills, but it's important to develop not the essential skills, but the voice that's unique. And I'll actually I'll tell you exactly why that is too, because there's three things that determine how much someone is willing to pay for a painting or any sort of creative product, right? The first is the desirability. So how much do they just love it, right? And if they don't love it, they're not going to buy it. But even if they love it, then it comes down to scarcity. Well, are there other artists out there doing very similar work at a similar level with the same degree of desirability to the work? And if you're doing work that just kind of shows the skill, but there's nothing kind of unique about it, then what people will do is it's like, well, if there's 20 artists that all produce work that looks very similar and the person loves it as much, they're going to shop with value, which means they're going to go to the cheapest artist. And the only way to differentiate yourself amongst that competition is to lower your price and be the best value for a dollar. But the problem is that then becomes a race to the bottom. That's not a race you want to be in, never mind win. But if you have a unique voice, if you can create work that no one else can, and if people love it, they only have the decision of can I afford it or not. They don't have the option to get something that is equally appealing to them at a lower price. And that's why it's so important that your work require mastery too, right? Because if it's easily copied, then it's not really a unique voice. Anyone can do it. And then the final thing that goes into why someone would buy a piece of work is urgency. Is there a reason I need to buy it now? And I'll just talk a little bit about pricing because I know that will probably come up. But that's why I encourage people at the beginning of their career to price their work as low as possible. You want to be that best value when you're starting out. Because here's two scenarios to think about. Artist A wants to get the most that they can from their work, and they're starting out. They're an emerging artist. So they price their work at a certain amount, but they're pricing it really high because they're thinking, I'm not letting this go unless I get exactly what I think it's worth. And so they do an art festival, and Friday night, nothing sells. And Saturday afternoon, a couple comes walking through their booth and they actually really like the art. And then they're thinking, okay, well, we might be interested in buying this, but it's like, you haven't sold anything yet. Okay, so that means that the rest of the world doesn't find this desirable. Maybe is there something wrong, or maybe you've got it priced too high. And so then they'll say, well, okay, well, we're going to go home and think about it, and maybe we'll come back tomorrow. And of course, 1 out of 10 of those people actually come back tomorrow. Now imagine there's another artist at that same festival, similar quality work, similar desirability, but it's priced 25% less. So it's a really good value. On Friday night, they sell 4 paintings, right? Saturday morning, they sell 4 more. That same couple walks through that booth now, after being at the other artist they were just at with the higher prices. Walks through that booth, they like the work just as much, and they see that, wow, he's already sold half of his inventory. Now that work is even more desirable to them because the rest of the world is reinforcing their opinion that this work is really good. But now they also realize if there's a painting they like there, they can't be sure that they can come back tomorrow and buy it because the artist is already selling work and has sold a lot. And that's where you get the urgency coming in. And then what ends up happening is people do come back on the Sunday and it's like the piece they wanted is gone. Okay, well, now what happens? Now, next time you have a show, and ideally you're capturing people's email, you can reach out to these people. Well, if they missed out, they're going to show up next time and they're going to buy early. But what you do when as that demand goes up and as your sales start, as they go up, you just raise your prices in small increments, right? By 10%. So over two festivals, you could raise your prices 10% per time, and you're already higher than that other artist that started out at the high price. But you've already started to get a buzz. You've got people are realizing, wow, people are buying this person's work. There's some urgency, all of that. So when you're starting out at low prices, it's not like that's where you're going to stay, but that is the best way to get your work out to as many people as possible. And then the other thing as well is that your early work has a short shelf life. Ideally, if you're spending time in process mode and you're mastering the skills and you're getting better and better and better, the work from a year ago now is markedly less good than your current work. And so you can't even exhibit it. So what you want to be doing is selling that early work as much as you can because it's pretty soon going to be outclassed by your newer work. Better to sell it at a low price, generate that buzz, than have it sitting in your basement because once it gets to the point where it's not as good as your new work, you can't even exhibit it because it just diminishes the value of your brand because people look at that and go, oh, that's not very good. So anyways, that's that. Cam, we got another one? Okay, apparently this is a two-parter. Okay, so I've done some of your great courses and I've learned a lot. I've also tried reproducing other artists for your own enjoyment. Yep. And the second part, how do I develop my own style? Okay, that's good. Yeah. So here's what you want to be doing, right? When you are following an influence and you're trying to kind of get inside their mind, how do they kind of translate the visual world to what they put on canvas or paper? And you're trying to think, what is the process that they paint in? Like for me, it's I use a red canvas, I block in the composition, I do the foreground first, then I do the sky holes kind of last, that whole kind of thing. And then you want to practice painting your own paintings from your own reference, in that style. And that's the thing too. We need to talk a little bit about copyright. It's okay to copy another artist's work or use someone else's photo if you're just doing it for fun or enjoyment. That's one of the fair use exceptions in copyright. But you're not allowed to like post it on your social media and say, look at the painting that I did, because you don't have, unless you have written permission from the person who holds the copyright. But they can't copyright a style, right? So people, and I encourage people, it's like, if you're going to use me as an influence, when you're trying to paint your own subject matter from your own photos, but in my style, by all means, sell that work. But don't stop there because then you just become a cheap imitation of me. Then you go on and you find multiple influences, right? And you do that with a number of artists. And that just increases the number of tools that you have in that artistic tool belt when you get up in front of the canvas. And then we get to the point where you are now. It's like, okay, well, how do I try and find me? And so what you want to be doing here, so you're moving totally in process mode, which means every time you go to paint in this mode, you are giving permission for the painting to fail, right? And that's very, very important. And I'll explain why at the end of this, why that's important. But you're giving permission to the painting to fail. But now you're just playing the what if game. It's like, what if I take these things that I learned that Tim Packard does in his paintings, but I also take this over here that Richard Schmee does, or that Brad Kunkel does over here, and I like the way this artist uses gold foil, or I really like the way Scott Burdick puts paint on thick with a palette knife or whatever. And you're mixing together all of these things, right? Because every time you use an artist as an influence, you're learning new skills, you're gaining new knowledge, you're getting more experience, and you're really pushing your creativity. And so one of my mentors in terms of filmmaking and course creation, when I was explaining this to him, he said, oh, it's like you're making this, you're using the same ingredients as everyone else to make a pizza, but you're just putting them together in a unique way. And it's like, yes, right? Because that's what you want to find. And you could just in your studio say, well, what if I did this? What if I did that? And at a certain point, when you've gained a huge amount of experience with different processes and different techniques, it actually does become that. Well, what if I just started on a black canvas and started with just throwing paint on it and then went from there? It's like, okay, well, let's see. Maybe that'll be a breakthrough. Maybe it'll be a dog's breakfast, but it's just like, okay, but what you might do is learn something in there. And what you always want to be attuned to while you're in this process mode is how much did I love actually that time that I spent trying that way of painting? How much did I love it? And then how much do I love the finished work? And again, when you're in process, a lot of it's going to be bad, and that's fine. But I will say this too. If you've mastered the skills and you've mastered composition, most of the work in process will still be sellable. I was in this mode of trying all over the map, searching for trying everything for about 3 or 4 years. And if you walked into my booth, it looked like there was 15 different artists exhibiting, but I was still selling most of the work because I'd mastered a huge skill set and I'd mastered composition. So everything that I did was skillfully executed and was a great composition. It just wasn't over the top, oh my God, I love it from people, or at least not from enough people. And you spend time in this, and what you're always looking for is certain when you're kind of shadowing another artist's techniques or style, you want to be noting what are the things where you really enjoyed painting that way, where it also turned out where you really liked it and potentially other people liked it. And that then just starts leading you down in a certain direction, right? Like, so for me, initially I was all over the map. I painted, well, I was a highly skilled portrait painter, realized I didn't want to do that. So it's like, what am I going to do? Well, I tried still lifes. I tried landscapes. I tried abstracts. I tried city scenes. I tried it in acrylic, in gouache, in oils, in watercolor. I tried collage, right? Just trying all this stuff. And then I realized, okay, I really like painting in the water soluble oils on canvas and I like landscapes. So then I had a lot of influences. People like Stephen Quiller, people like Tom Thompson, Zoltan Szabo, where I tried learning what Zoltan Szabo is, where I learned about negative shapes and negative painting. And then Linda Kemp, another artist, turned me on to negative shapes. But then what eventually happened is I was all over the map. Brian Adio was another influence of mine until the one day I created a painting called Forest Window, which was the very first one I did, which was of the sun kind of streaming through the trees. And it still holds up today. If I had that original and put it, I could send that to any gallery that carried my work and it would sell right away. But that was the breakthrough, right? I created this piece and it was like, oh my God, like that was probably the most enjoyable painting session I'd ever had in my life. And I looked at that painting and thought, I can't believe I just did that. So I know I love the process and I love the finished work. Now the question is, what does the public feel? Because so many artists stop here. And I had already come up with a few other ways of painting where I loved the process, but the public just liked the work, where I'd have a few sales, but nothing kind of over the top. And I just realized, well, that's not it. Back into process mode. But when I did this painting, it's like, okay, this might be it. I know I love it. I know that I love the process, but we need to see the public's reaction. So I was doing an art festival, and I brought that painting as well as like 25 other paintings. And that was the only one. I just finished it before this festival. So it was hanging in my booth. 5 minutes into the show, this couple walked by and went, oh my God, we love this. And they bought it. And luckily for me, they were like, okay, well, we just got here. We want to walk around. And it was a 3 foot by 3 foot canvas. They're like, we don't really want to lug this around. Can you just keep it here for us? And we'll pay you now, but we'll come back and pick it up when we're finished walking around. And I said, sure. Well, I could have sold that painting 20 times in the next hour. Everybody that came in just went gaga for that painting. But then what happened is they were so disappointed that that painting was sold, they didn't even look at anything else that I had in the booth. So I actually finally ended up taking the painting down and wrapping it so that people would look at other work. So that was the reaction. It's like, okay, I think there's something there. Well, then I was involved in a charity auction for the Burlington Arts Center. And I thought, And it was an auction where it was a black tie affair, so it was a good auction with qualified audience that spend good money. Robert Bateman actually donated a small original every year that would go for like $10,000 or $12,000. So there was people there with money. I did two paintings in this new style. They both sold at auction for over double what I had been charging for pieces that size. And then the next morning, one of the ladies on the board of the art center called and asked if she could commission a piece from me in that same style at the price I had listed on there, not what it went for at auction. And so that, again, you're looking at that feedback. Okay, I loved it. I love the process. The public seems to love it. So now it's time to go right into product mode. And now I am just going to put my head down and try and create as much work as I can in this style that I loved, where I love the process, love the work. And I got up the courage to enter a really big art expo. It was a $5,000 booth fee. And I was very nervous about that. Well, I had about 30 paintings in this new style. I'd made my booth fee back by 11 o'clock in the morning. The show opened at 10. By the time my wife got there on opening night after work, I was at 10,000. We did 18,000 in sales over the course of the opening day, and ended up just shy of $30,000 at the end of the 4-day festival, and only because I'd run out of work. And that's the reaction. That's what I say. The world is not shy about telling you when you've hit that voice. That's what it looks like. And so then the key is you just keep cycling through this of, again, seeking out influences, gaining new skills and experiences, and then spending time in process, putting it together in your own way until you create that work where that happens. And then once you get there, like I say, everything's easy. But the biggest reason most artists fail is they stop. They stop at pretty good response, pretty good sales. They get to the work where, I love the work, I love the process, and the public kind of likes it. The problem is now they're choosing among thousands of other artists' work who they kind of like. You need to keep going until you find that thing that you do that no one else does, where the public, and again, you don't need to have everybody feel that way. You just need enough of the public to feel that way. You only need one person more per year who wants to buy your work than the amount of work you can create, right? But you do need to become somebody's favorite artist. You can't be just in that group of, oh, there's 100 artists, we like all their work, because then they're going to go to the one that's the cheapest. So I hope that answers that question. We got another one, Cam? Okay, what Giclée canvas reproduction printers do you recommend for drop shipping with good margins? I don't. I don't have any. I do all of my own publishing. So we have our own big Giclée printer. The Cameron actually has it at his house for now. I did it for years, but I learned how to do it, how to photograph the artwork, and how to do the prints for a couple reasons. When I started back in 2000, well, they said drop shipping. Drop shipping is where someone else actually looks after fulfilling the order and shipping it. Yeah. So I don't know of any, and I'm not even sure I'd recommend that, because here's the thing, like if you're going through another printer, first of all, the reason I did my own and decided to learn how to do it is I couldn't find anyone who could do the quality that I wanted. That was 25 years ago, so I'm sure there are printers out there who do pretty good quality. The problem is they need to make a living, right? And so you are going to pay a lot for them to do your prints. The actual cost of the materials is very, very low. So the margins are huge if you can do it yourself. So like for a Giclée that we sell for $1,180, a 36 by 48 Giclée, we sell it for almost $1,200. The cost of the canvas and ink is about $50. And it cost me about $60 to get it stretched. So my costs are only like $110. I've got a 10-time markup. That's a really good margin. That's also enough of a margin that if when I was in a lot of galleries, I could also sell my prints through the galleries because they only pay 50%. So even if they're only paying me $500 wholesale for the print, I'm still making $400 on a print that I'm selling to the gallery. If you're going to go through a printer, they're probably going to charge you like $400 or $500 for that print. which means now your margins are really, really low. It doesn't make sense at all to go through a gallery because now everybody needs a piece of the pie, the printer, the gallery, and you. So I really recommend for artists, if you are going to get into self-publishing your own prints, to do it all yourself. And you can start with a desktop printer that just prints on like watercolor paper. That you can do little small prints, just mat them, put them in crystal clear bags, and sell them that way. But I don't have anyone I recommend, and I don't really recommend that business model because there's just not enough over. There's a huge amount of competition out there in terms of people selling prints, right? And so why are they going to buy your print over someone else's? Well, when you're starting out, you can actually compete on the value in terms of having your prints priced lower, but only if you have very low overhead, and that's where printing yourself. I just recommend it. I think Brooke Cormier actually does use someone else to do her prints. So if you might want to just reach out to her and ask her, you could. I'm pretty sure Brooke's pretty good at answering people. So if you were to go on her YouTube channel and message her and just ask her if she uses someone to service her prints, she'd probably tell you. Although it might be someone in Germany because she's living in Vienna, or it might be in Austria. Anyways, that's that. How do you identify artists you like that are actually making a good living from their art, since we actually don't know how much they're making? Some talk a good game but aren't selling any. That's a really good question. So typically the best way to find that out is, there's a couple ways. I remember when I was starting out and was just starting to do art festivals. Actually, I think it was before I'd even heard of art festivals. A good friend of mine, Marilyn Mercer, one of my mentors, she used to do all the art festivals. And she told me, she said, Tim, you should start doing these art festivals because there's this young guy, he's doing these landscapes, and he did like 20,000 in sales on the weekend. He was just like 3 booths down from me. And though that's crazy numbers, right? And his name was Peter Rotter. And then this buzz kept going around that this guy was selling so many paintings. But the funny thing was, a lot of artists didn't want to believe he was doing that well. And that's the other thing too. When you see other people's success, you got two choices. You can kind of go, wow, if they can do it, I can do it. Or you can let it sting and it's like, oh, why them, and get the envy and all that. Well, I really wanted it to be true because I wanted to know somebody was selling art kind of at this level. And so, but a lot of artists were saying, I don't believe it. I think he's just putting red dots up there to make it look like it and the hype. So I actually went the year before that I did the Toronto Art Expo. I went to the expo and I stood and I watched his booth for an hour. And I saw 4 different people come and buy one of his paintings. And it's like, okay, that's one way to tell. So if it's someone who's selling at art festivals, if it's that type of thing, then go where they are showing and see if they're actually moving like that. The other way you can tell if an artist is doing well is kind of the level of the galleries that they're in, right? The higher end galleries that have the highest level and caliber of artists, they only accept artists who sell well. They're not in the business of trying to help someone's career along. They're in the business of showing and selling the work of already accomplished artists who are in big demand, right? So you can just check out an artist if they say they're really selling well. Well, they're selling one of 3 ways. They're selling online, in which case you don't know. There's no way really of telling how much they sell. They're selling at art festivals. You can go and check out, just watch them and see if anybody's buying their work. Or you can go to their booth on the start of the show and then come back at the end of the show and see how many paintings are still there, how many are left, how many have sold. Or checking out in galleries. And in some galleries as well, you will be able to see kind of recently sold works by the artist, right? So some galleries, if you go and you check out an artist that not only has their works, it has their recently solds. So if it's someone who's selling a lot, if you go back every few weeks and there's new recently solds, wow, they're selling a ton of work. When I was actively painting and shipping my works out to galleries and making most of my money doing that, if you'd gone to Koyman Galleries, that's one of the galleries, I'm only in 2 galleries right now because I'm not really creating enough work to service the dozen galleries I used to be in. And I'm doing a lot of sales directly now. So if you go to my Koyman site now, you won't see any sales because they haven't sold anything in the last 2 or 3 weeks. But if you had gone to Koyman's and checked my artist page out back 7 years ago when I was creating 120 paintings a year and selling all of them, every week that you went there, you would see 2 or 3 new paintings sold. And if you went to my site on Gallery on the Lake, where I also sold a ton, if you looked what was there and then came back 3 weeks later, you would see a bunch of paintings no longer there, right? And so that's the way you can do it. If it's someone says they're selling a lot online, then I guess you have to kind of take it, take it for what it is and kind of look at the work. But typically, if someone is selling a lot, they're probably going to be successful in some of these different areas that you'll be able to back it up, but maybe not. But yeah, okay. How do you set up a studio and make it comfortable to be in and do art? Well, that's a loaded question. The one thing I would say is, first of all, it depends on what type of medium you're doing, right? What type of paint you're using. And for artists starting out, and again, remember, this whole idea of making a living as an artist is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And so it's like if you were to start golfing, you wouldn't start taking golf lessons and then immediately be looking for an agent and endorsements and trying to play in qualifying tournaments for the PGA, because you first got to get really, really good at golf, right? So that's the thing about art. If you're kind of starting out, the first thing is you got to get really, really good at painting. And so I would recommend for people starting out, starting in watercolor for a couple reasons. One of them is it is the cheapest and easiest medium to get set up with, right? You can buy a full sheet of watercolor paper. You can cut it into eighths of a sheet, and you can paint on both sides. So one $10 sheet of watercolor paper allows you to do 16 paintings. And there are going to be a lot of bad ones at the beginning. So you don't want to be buying $20 canvases and be painting on those, because those bad ones are costing you a lot of money, and then you get very precious. Whereas when it's just an eighth of a sheet, no problem. But the other thing about watercolor is it's so easy to set up. When I first started painting seriously again, I started painting in watercolor for that reason, that it was easy. Cameron, my son, was allergic to oils, so I couldn't paint in oils. And so I started painting in watercolor. But I just had a 4 foot by 4 foot section in the way between our kitchen and the family room. It was like an open concept at the back of the house. And I made my own kind of easel for watercolor, where I used a tripod and then had a board and used like the shoes that you mount a camera with in the board. So I had the board on the tripod that I could stand there and paint, and I could adjust the angle and I could spin it. And I had a dresser beside me, an antique dresser that I'd refinished, that I just had my watercolor palette on, and I had paper towels and the water, and then just my watercolor brushes. And because the key when you're starting out is you need to be able to paint at least 3 times a week to improve, because that learning is cumulative. So it's like going to the gym, right? You can't go to the gym once every 2 months and work out for a weekend and expect results. By the same token, you can't do that with painting. You can't go to a workshop once every 3 months and spend a week painting and think you're going to improve, because now you lose all of that benefit while you're not painting. So you got to do it 3 times a week. So the real key is something where you can just immediately come over and I just wet my brushes, wet the paint, and start painting. If I had an hour, it was worth me painting for an hour. And when I was finished, I just rinsed my brushes, laid them on the paper towel, and walked away. Everything stayed set up. If you've got to set up and then you've got to take down, then an hour is not even worth painting it, right? Because you got 20 minutes to set up. You're going to paint for 20 minutes, and you got to take stuff down. But that's what I would recommend. Something where it's easy, where you can have a permanent space where you can just go sit there and get up and walk away when you're done, and just come down and sit there and paint. And then the other reason why I recommend watercolor is it's the most challenging, difficult medium to master. So you are going to learn more and learn faster by doing watercolor, because you don't have the chance to come back and fix mistakes when you're using opaque paints like acrylic and oils or whatever. So it will teach you to be masterful and to learn the skills more, because there's real jeopardy when you make mistakes. But the good thing about that is once you've mastered watercolor, every other medium becomes much easier. But you will never ever regret that skill you achieved through painting in watercolor. So I was a senior signature member of the Canadian Institute of Portrait Artists, and I was elected member of the Canadian Institute of Painters in Watercolor. I don't paint in watercolor anymore, But the skill that I developed when I learned to master watercolor, I rely on every day in my oil paintings. So that's the number one thing, again, is that where you can just leave it set up and just come sit down and paint and then just get up and walk away. Not a lot of setup or takedown. Thoughts on abstract styles? Oh, that's a really good question. So I'll say something that may blow you guys away because you know my favorite painter in the world is Brian Rutenberg. That's Rutenberg, and he is an abstract painter, and he creates abstracts that do exactly what I said. I still remember the first time I was leafing through an American art collector magazine, and there was a full page ad advertising one of his shows, and it stopped me in my tracks, and it took my breath away. Right, you start to salivate when you see an artist, and I just went, oh my god, I can't believe this. I just love this work. And then what I really wanted, I thought, like, please tell me this guy's really successful, because I think I'm a pretty good judge of art, and when I see work that makes me feel that way, I'm hoping the world also does. So I went and Googled them, and it's like, yeah, 24 by 24 of his sells for like $20,000. So, like, hallelujah. But here's the thing with abstracts: painting abstracts is easy. All you got to do is throw paint on a canvas. It's easy. Painting abstracts that stop people in their tracks and take their breath away is the most difficult thing you can do as an artist. It is more difficult than what I do to be able to do that consistently over and over, because the only thing you have your hang your hat on is composition. You can get away with a 8 out of 10 composition if you've done 10 out of 10 in terms of the way that, if it's, say it's a figurative piece, the way that you've, handled the flesh tones and light and shadow, and just brilliant drawing and draftsmanship and all that kind of stuff. When you're talking about abstract, we've just got random marks on a canvas. The ability to do that and have that impact on people is very, very rare. And it's because a lot of people paint abstracts because they go, well, I can't really draw very well. If I do a subject that requires drawing, it just shows up the fact that I don't draw well. I'm not good at light and shadow, so I'm not going to do that. I'm not really good at scumbling and different painting techniques, so I'll just mush paint around on the canvas because I can just do that. Yeah, that's easy. The chances of that turning into a great painting are about the same as if you give Coco the monkey a paintbrush. And so there are a number of abstract painters out there that do what I just said, like Brian Rutenberg. There's not that many. There's a lot that just push paint around and just make reasonably attractive decorative splotches of paint on a canvas. And then the problem is, it's like, what separates them from anyone else? And so then the work just becomes kind of like a commodity. But that's what I would say. And the other thing that I would say, the other thing, when I researched Brian Rutenberg, guess what? The guy draws like a mad fiend. His skill set is at the absolute highest. He paints abstract because he chooses to take on that challenge, not because he doesn't have the skill to paint anything else. And through my experience, that has been borne out with the abstract painters whose work I absolutely love and who are very successful. They also have like the full kind of skill set behind them, that they've chosen abstract, and they've mastered it. They didn't go to abstract as a lazy way of not learning how to draw, not learning all of the other stuff that goes into art. So that's my thoughts on that. I love brilliant abstracts because I recognize that's the most difficult challenge. I see a lot of mediocre to not very good abstracts out there, and I rarely see one where an artist takes my breath away with their work, because it's very, very difficult. Oh, this is a great question because I was there. So it's, hi, Tim. Interested to hear how you would proceed if the public absolutely love what you're doing, but you don't enjoy the process. Start from scratch or tweak? Okay, well, I was actually here, right? So my story is that when I decided in my 30s that I wanted to get back into painting again, paint 3 times a week, is like, what am I going to paint? And so I was an ex-fraud investigator in our commercial crime units. I investigated frauds that were over $2 million. So I had a very analytical mind, and I still do, which is why I think I'm good at about this whole creating a career, because I've analyzed every bit of my career, many other artists, and trying to figure out what is it? Why do these people successful and these ones aren't? But I was reading magazines, just like I'll start buying the Artist magazine, International Artist magazine, Watercolor magazine, all this kind of stuff, and all of them said the same thing: when you're starting out, paint what you love. Well, I had two young boys, Cameron and Scott. So it's like, I'm going to start doing paintings of my young boys. And so that's what I started doing. I got really good at painting them. I got some of the portraits I did of them, got into juried shows. I won my first award with the very first painting I did in water soluble oils was a portrait of my son Scott. So that won an award. And I really loved painting people. And so then I kind of, it's like you can only have so many paintings of your boys, right? But what was really surprising me is people were buying paintings of my boys. Not a lot, but enough that my wife finally said, no more paintings of the boys. You can't paint another one of them till someone buys one. But people were buying them a little. But then I started doing paintings of other people. And it was mainly just friends and family. You know, we'd go to a pool party or whatever. I'd have my camera and it's like, do you guys mind if I take pictures? And I'd be taking pictures of everybody kind of in the getting the right light and that pictures that I wanted to paint. And then let people would find out that, okay, Tim did a picture of you, and these would often sell. And so then I started doing actual commissions where, and this is when I was still in the police force, where now I would do commissions where people would hire me to paint a portrait of their son, of their daughter, of their wife, whatever. And initially, when I started out, it was I just wanted to get the experience of doing this. And I wanted to keep improving and I wanted to kind of start to develop this kind of side hustle as an artist. I still had no thought at this point of leaving my job as a police officer. And when I initially started, it was all mainly friends and family. And I just had a, if you don't like it, you don't buy it policy. So I would just take the bunch of pictures and then I would just go paint the painting I wanted to paint. And then when they saw it, they could either buy it or not buy it. And most of the time people did buy it. But then what happened is I started getting more and more serious. And then when I left the police force to paint full time, now it wasn't a, if you don't like it, you don't buy it, right? That was a great strategy to get 100 portraits out there in people's homes and develop a reputation. Now it's like, no, the client is going to have some input into the process. And now it's not painting paintings of people that I want to paint. It's painting paintings of other people in the pose, in the situation, in the way that they wanted me to paint them. And I was already off the police force a year into my career as a portrait painter when I came to realize I hate this. I loved painting people the way I wanted to paint them. But I would rather have root canal than go in and do another portrait of somebody with their kids sitting on the porch next to his sister holding this book and the painting that they wanted me to do. But now I'd created this situation where that's what I have to do, right? And I almost just sucked it up and stuck with that. And I had a bunch of artist friends I was explaining this to, and they were saying, "Yeah, you know, this is what you're really good at." And at that point, I painted landscapes a little bit, kind of, and I liked doing them, but they didn't sell. They sold for about 20% as much as one of my portraits. And so I'd mentioned this to a number of my artist friends. And at this point, I was on the board of the Canadian Watercolor Society, and they're saying, "Yeah, you're just gonna have to suck it up and paint the portraits, man. Like you got to make a living and all that." And I said the same thing to one of my friends, Neville Clark, and he told me he was disgusted with me. And this was someone probably who I respected more than any other artist. And he went up one side of me, down the other side. He said, if you want to paint landscapes, because I'd actually said that's really what I'm kind of drawn to now. And I realized it's not portraits. He said, if you want to paint landscapes, then you paint effing landscapes. But what made you think it would be easy, right? It might take you 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years to get to the point where your landscapes have the same appeal and you're getting the same kind of sales as you do from your portraits. But it's like, you know, how dare you kind of settle for doing what you don't want to do? You need to go after what you love. And so anyways, I came home and told my wife I'm painting landscapes, and she said, "No, you're not. You've got 20 portraits to do." So we came to a deal, which was I would paint portraits for 50% of my time, and we could still take on portrait commissions, but I could spend 50% of my time in that process mode that I talked about. And I could spend 50% of my time doing that. And when and if I reached a point where my landscapes sold for as much as my portraits. At that point, I could cut off the portrait business and just go to the landscapes. And so that's what I did. So my experiences was like, again, if you need it to pay the bills, then you need to keep doing it while you're working on trying to find what you really love. If you don't need it to pay the bills, if you're just working another job and doing this, but you don't love the process, don't do it. Because the whole goal is to get to the point where there's an incredible demand for the work that you do. And you don't want to be in a situation where I was, where it became a job that I didn't want to do. And I already had a job that I liked. I was really good at as being a police officer. I was a detective in one of the kind of top kind of squads, doing really, really interesting work, and was making a very good living doing that. I liked doing that. It turned out more than I did painting portraits of other people. So if you're going to do this, you want to make sure that you don't settle for what you don't love. And there was a few things I did. I did these watercolor landscapes that were very abstracted, where I really, really loved the process, and I loved the finished work. And people just kind of liked them. And I think part of the reason was because they were watercolor, they could only be done small. And these were very abstracted. And my galleries said to me, if you could get this big on canvas, then I think there's something really there. So I went for a couple months in process mode, played around, was able to get the same look on a 4 foot by 4 foot canvas that I had in a quarter sheet watercolor. And I ended up doing 2 or 3 of these pieces. And when I brought him into the gallery, the owner was gaga over it. Oh my God, I love these. We're going to do, great. And I was like, yeah, you're only getting these 3, because I didn't love the process. I loved the process when I was doing it in watercolor. I didn't love what I had to do to get that same look, with starting with an acrylic underpainting and then oil glazing over top. So I just knew that's not it. I could have made a very good career doing that stuff as well, but then it would have come to the point that I'm not doing what I love, right? The whole reason to take this chance to do this is to be able to get up every day and go into your studio and do what you love. If you're not doing that, there are a lot of other ways that are better ways to make money, that will allow you then to just go in your studio and do what you love and not worry about sales. Okay, Cameron's telling me that we got a lot of questions, so I don't need to extend, and if I can be briefer, I should. Okay. My full-time job pays the bills, but leaves me little time to develop my painting. I'm unsure whether to quit and focus fully on art, or keep the job and paint only on weekends. What would you advise? Um, the one thing I would say is, when we're talking about being an artist, we often think we have a make or break thing. I've got to make X by a certain time, or I'm going to give it up, or whatever. And that's the wrong attitude. The right attitude is what Simon Sinek, who's the guy who came up with the Start With Why. He talks about the infinite game, right? If you want to be an artist, the whole point is to be able to get up every day and keep playing the game. So you never want to take risks that take you out of the game, right? So that, like, if you were to quit your job and focus on art full time, if there's the potential that you're going to lose your house, or lose your mortgage, you not pay your mortgage, whatever, your kids' college fund, whatever, if this doesn't work out, that's not a good risk. You want to take risks where, if things go the absolute worst they can, you're still able to get up and play the game. It's not going to take you out. So I would say that I would lean more towards painting on the weekends, and and focusing on your career until you're getting to the point where, and you always want to test first. You don't want to, wing in a prayer, quit your job, start painting, and hope you can sell your work. Like, when I left the police force, I was already selling a lot of work. I was already getting a lot of commissions. So that's kind of the thing I would say here too, is until you're actually starting to sell your work, and at a reasonable price where you can see that there's a potential here, I wouldn't even think about leaving your job. But I would actually suggest something kind of in the middle, if it's possible. I mean, that wasn't possible for me. I was either a full-time police officer or I wasn't. But I would recommend for people, if you can get some sort of part-time employment that gives you a little more time to work on your art, But you want to, whatever you do, you want to make decisions based on proven empirical evidence that, okay, where you are right now, people are willing to pay for your art, right? That's the very first thing you need to be at before you even think about taking these kinds of steps. And then if it's like, okay, if I can do this full time, it's like, well, is there a chance of it taking you out of the game? And for me, the answer was no, because we had thought a lot about this, and my wife made enough money. She had a very good job. She made enough money that if this went totally in the ditch and I was a complete failure, she could still cover all our expenses. We wouldn't be going away on vacation or going out for dinners or anything, but she could still cover all our expenses. We weren't going to lose our house or have to move or anything like that. And I also had a skill set, because I was a detective in the commercial crime unit, that we have people every year leave at my age and go work in the private sector for corporate security for big companies or big tech, making over $100,000 a year. So I knew if this didn't work out, I could go get another job, where I'd be making really good money. What I didn't realize at the time, my wife and I had a deal, and it was this. She said that, my wife was a banker, and so she said, when she came to me and said, I think we should talk about you doing this full time and leaving the police force. But she was very clear. This is not because it's like, oh, I want to see you fulfilled and following your dream. This is not like unconditional support. This is because I think this might be in the best long term interest of our family economically. What I'd already shown and accomplished while I was on the police force as an artist led her to believe that I could actually become successful and potentially make more money as an artist, and potentially lifetime earnings much greater as an artist than I would make as a police officer, even including if I stayed to get my pension. And so the deal was, as long as that looks like it might happen, that might be a possibility, I'm willing to support this. But if it ever becomes clear that it's not going to happen, then you need to commit to me now that you'll put on a suit and get a job in corporate security. And so that was the deal we made. Now, it ended up taking me 5 years until that aha moment with the Forest Window, where I did that 30,000, almost 30,000 in sales in a weekend. And then we never looked back. Pretty soon I was making over 100,000, then 200. And I say in 2015, I think that was the last time I was fully just focused on creating my art and selling it before I got into teaching on YouTube and doing social media and that. But that was the last year that I was just focused on creating and selling my art. And that year I made $280,000. Which was a lot more than I would have made on the police force. And then it's gone on very, very well since. And my wife was able to retire early, and she golfs 80 rounds a year now. So it was a very good decision. But that's what I would say. You want to just make sure you don't do this on a wing and a prayer. If there's huge jeopardy, if it doesn't work out, you want to do it incrementally, but you want to wait until you've proven, first of all, that you're able to create you've achieved the skills and knowledge, all of that you're able to create work that people want to buy, first of all. And then how much they want to buy and what you can charge for that will impact those things. But I would recommend to everybody, go slower, because as soon as you leave your other job, now you're going to be forced to do work you don't want to do. And that's not going to be in furtherance of you finding that unique voice just to pay the bills. In hindsight, I probably would have reached my voice sooner, as crazy as this sounds, if I'd have stayed on the police force for another year or two and then painted a lot of my own, because then I wouldn't have been forced to paint stuff I didn't want to paint just to make enough money to keep this going. Okay, next cam. As a part-time artist, I feel as if I found my voice. I believe I paint par with my favorite artists. I have a good following on Facebook. How and when should I start selling? Okay, well, yeah, I mean, because that's the thing. The public will tell you whether you found this voice or not. You may find a voice that you love, which is great. The question is, does the public love it? I would say if people are, first of all, people will reach out to you on Facebook to buy your work. If they love it, because I love your works are like, a cup of coffee. $5 will get you a cup of coffee. And same with, like, I love your work. It's like, yeah, show me the money, right? If they're not actually buying your work, then they don't love it enough. And the only way to do that is to start getting your work out there, right? So there's 3 ways I recommend to start selling your work. The first one is, most people, wherever they live, there's usually like a local art association or an artist guild or an artist co-op or whatever. Join that, because they often put on a show every year where they'll have they'll rent a space and put a show on of members work or whatever. But also with joining one of these things, you'll also learn about other opportunities, right? And one of those are art festivals. So depending where you live, but I know like in kind of Canada and the US, there's a ton of art festivals every weekend from the spring right through to the fall where you pay your money, you get to your 10 by 10 spot and you get to put your tent up and hang your work there. And people come and they either buy or they don't buy. And then the other thing is often if there is an art group or co-op where you are, they often run studio tours as well. And what that is the group kind of organizes the whole thing. And then over the course of 1 or 2 weekends, people who are interested in art, like the artists, will kind of open up their home. And you don't have to have people come in your house. You can have it in your garage or just have it in the front room. Or sometimes people will even do it like in a local library where they'll let artists exhibit. But joining a studio tour where it's all kind of organized and you're just kind of setting up like your little gallery in your space, and people on a studio tour come by and they buy or they don't buy. And then the other option, which was the one that I did that worked out really well, is what I call studio open house. And that's where you basically you might just turn one room of your house into like a gallery, depending on how many pieces, or it might be like in your living room and family room or whatever. And you've got your work displayed there. But then you start off just inviting all your friends and family and coworkers to your house. You just let them know, I'm having a show of my art. You invite them, you have wine and snacks and that kind of thing, and they come and maybe they buy, maybe they don't. But that's a great way to kind of start off. And what I would tell you is like your friends and family are the people who are going to be most supportive of this journey. So if your friends and family aren't willing to buy your work, then very unlikely that strangers are going to be willing to do it. But I did my very first studio open house, and the way that I did it, I like to do what Seth Godin calls putting yourself on the hook. So once I decided I was going to get back serious about my art, and I decided I was going to start trying to sell my art, I announced to everybody, like so if it was now, I'd say I'm having a show at my house next January. And I actually picked the date. It's going to be January 21st, and I'm going to have a show and sale of my paintings. And I started promoting that. So that two things, right? First of all, the longer you have kind of promoting it, the more people are likely kind of gonna be interested in and coming. But also it puts you on the hook because it's like, okay, now I got to deliver. I'm either going to put together a collection of paintings that I'm going to have to display for sale the next year, or I'm not going to do it, which means I'm, talking the talk but not walking the walk. So I did that very first studio open house. We had probably about 50 or 60 people, friends, coworkers, family, all that. I sold about 20 paintings. I think I grossed $2,000 because I was barely just selling it enough to make back my framing, material costs, and a little bit of profit. But I went on to do that every year. And I guess I ran my own commercial gallery from about 2015 to 2020 when COVID hit. But the very last studio open house I did, which was probably then 2014, and the year before, we were routinely doing $50,000 in sales in a weekend out of my home, because it had become a big thing with people coming to the show. So it could turn into something really big. But that's what I would do is you just need to get your work out there, and then people will tell you whether that's the voice or not. Next, Cam. Any tips on learning perspective, please? Yeah, just Google perspective on online and look for, there are books on perspective. It's a science, right? It's not like a creative thing. It's a physical property of the way kind of light works and perspective and the way shapes work. So there are books out there on it, I'm sure. So just Google that and get a book. And then the way to do it is you can read all you want. You only get better by doing it. So I remember when I was in high school in a commercial art program, we had to, you start off just by drawing a cube in 2-point perspective, right? And doing that. And then it's like, okay, draw a house in 2-point perspective where everything is perfect in perspective with the vanishing points. And then it's like, okay, now draw a city block in 2-point perspective. And just take on more challenging things where it's involving kind of straight lines where perspective is at play, or when you're, like the whole idea of like if things getting further away, like fence posts, right? How closer do they get? Well, if you just keep doing X's, dividing it in half and doing X's, that's That's the exact distance where they would be if they're equally spaced. But I know for one of the top animation studios in Toronto, Max the Mutt, their final exam was the students had to do a spiral staircase in perfect perspective. Not because that's what they were going to be doing, but it's because that is the truest test. If you can do a spiral staircase in perfect perspective, then you can do anything. But you start simple, start with blocks. But it's not something that's intuitive. There's an actual science behind how this works. So the best way is just to get a book on perspective and then do the exercises. You can't just look at the stuff and go, oh, that makes sense. You've actually got to do the exercises, getting more and more challenging. And then once you get it, it's easy. Okay. Sales last year were really tough for everyone I spoke to last year at the art shows. Yeah, I agree. And that's kind of that's the nature of being an artist, right? That we deal with the ebb and flow of the economy and uncertainty, right? So we all know who's responsible for the uncertainty, not just here in Canada, but all over the world, right? That when people are uncertain about the future, when they're uncertain, I don't know if I sell a painting next week to someone in the US, if it's going to go through or I'm going to be charged 100% tariff, right? Don't know. And it's been like that for, well, it was settled for a while, but now everything's up in the air again. And so it's like, yeah, when there's uncertainty, people end up kind of hunkering down, and that means they don't spend that much money on luxury items because they're preparing for the coming storm. And that's just the nature of what it is. When that happens, I guess you have two options. You could lower your prices if that would make a difference, but the only thing that's going to change is when people feel confident again about the world in general, but in particular about their own employment and their own security, their own financial security, then that will happen. But I will tell you, it comes in ebbs and flows. So this is, I would say, yeah, this is a bit of a bust in terms of people buying luxury items. That's always followed by a boom. And so you want to be ready to take advantage of it, and you need to do whatever it is you need to do to get through it. And if that means maybe getting a part-time job to help pay the bills, kind of it is what it is. Just knowing that that one of my favorite quotes from one of the group of seven, he said, the secret to success is just outlasting your competition, right? So you know that some people will give up, and it's like, good, more for us, right? But the other thing I will tell you, and that's why having that unique voice and having that great thing, and that people just love it and want to buy it, as opposed to just being one of many artists who people love, where it's just like you're one of 20 artists and you're all getting a little piece of the pie, is that there are people out there who are recession proof, economy proof, uncertainty proof. There's a lot of people out there with multi-million dollar net worths, right? Those people buy what they want when they want it, regardless of what's going on out there. But those people are looking at buying at the highest end. And so if you're just one of a bunch of artists who sells to kind of medium prices to kind of middle class people, you're going to be the hardest hit because there's more competition there and at that price point, and there's more artists. There's the people that will buy in that price point are more likely the middle class people. Once your work gets up to the point that you're really only targeting the wealthy because they're the only ones that can afford your originals, guess what? They become economy proof. They can buy whenever they want, which is why it's so important to become part of that group. And that comes down to something called the Pareto distribution. He was a civil engineer, but basically came up with and realized that this happens in life, that in any group of people, a small number of people are responsible for the majority of the outcomes, whether that's publishing scientific papers, publishing books like authors, or selling paintings, who makes the most money in music, that kind of thing. If you take a small group of the top performers, will make as much or more than the rest of everyone combined. And you'll often hear that referred to as like the 80-20, where 20% make as much as the 80, but it's actually more, I think they've shown, like the square root, which means if you are one of 36 artists at a festival, and you're doing reasonably well, the top six will have as much sales as the next 30. And so if you're one of those 30, that's a very dangerous place to be in, because the key here too is the top six are making at least as much as the other 30, but the seventh and eighth artist are not making more than the 36th place artist, because it's not a straight curve. It's like a hockey stick. It's like, here's everybody in the bottom, and then you hit here, and then the earnings go up through the roof. And if you do the math, if there's, and this is also why just getting into a gallery is not necessarily going to be a huge thing for people. I thought the first time my work was in a gallery, it's like, oh my God, this is great. Well, guess what? If there was 36 artists in the gallery, unless you're the top six, you're only probably selling, one painting every couple months or something. Whereas the top artists in the gallery are probably selling a couple paintings a week. So that's why mastery is so important, because just being really good is not good enough. You got to be in that Pareto group. And that's, again, why not stopping on that journey and starting to market your really good work. That is not a strategy to achieve ultimate success. You need to keep on that journey until you are getting that over the top reaction, because that then will quickly get you into the price point and into the clientele of wealthy people. And they do not buy based on the economy. If you're selling work in that kind of $300 to $2,000 price point, which a lot of artists are, guess what? It's middle class people that are buying your work, and they're the most susceptible to the economy. So what's the solution? Create better work that has more appeal, that's unique, that gets that over the top reaction. Yep. You can't really lower your prices if you've been selling at a particular price point, can you? No, not without it hurting your reputation. So you have to make that. If it means paying the bills, you got to do what you got to do, right? But no, it's never a good idea to lower your price if you've already been consistently selling at a certain price. But at the end of the day, I think people will, and the reason you don't want to do that, right, is you don't want to tick off clients who have bought your work at a certain price, and then they come back next year and now your price is lowered, right? And they're going to go, oh, wow, you've just devalued my work. So it's not a really good idea. It's a good idea to start low and raise your prices gradually so that you never ever get above the perceived value. But that said, right, when tough economic times hit, I think people will understand, right? It's kind of like if you were in the recession or the depression, right? When people are starving or whatever, if it's like, you know what, and you can articulate to people, if someone says, oh, wow, I paid $1,200 for a piece that size now you've got it down to $999, you could articulate, yeah, I just really hate lowering the prices, and I really hate the fact that, other people have paid higher prices, but the economy has just really, really tanked. And I just need to do what I need to do to get through this until the economy picks up and people have some certainty again, and then my prices will go back up. But in the meantime, I need to do what I need to do to actually pay the rent and to buy groceries. So, I mean, I think if it's at that level, you need to do what you need to do. If you can weather the storm, the good news is that, yeah, you're building up inventory now, but when the economy changes, all of a sudden there will be a boom again. And then you go into those years where all of a sudden it's like, wow, you can't keep up and you've got that inventory there. But yeah, you have to make the hard decisions sometimes. Is it cool if I price my paintings at $20? I haven't sold anything yet and just need work to get seen. Yeah, maybe. It depends, right? So like, let's talk about what a painting's worth and what your time's worth in that. Right? Like I see a lot of times people are recommending, well, you should get paid X number of dollars per hour for your work, or you should get X number of dollars per square inch. The reality is when we start out, our time is not worth anything. Not only that, it has a negative value, right? So that would be like if you took $100 worth of materials and a frame and created a painting, and then you said to someone, would you like this? And they said no. Like, right. So you've taken 100, because it's not, they wouldn't even hang it for free. And that's where we all start. So it's like at that stage, your time actually has a negative value. If that painting took you 4 hours, your time is worth negative $25 an hour because you took $100 of material in 4 hours, you took it down to zero. And then at a certain point, you'll be good enough where you can actually make back your materials and supply costs. So it's kind of like you take $100 worth of materials, and now you've created a frame painting that you can sell for $100. Okay, good. Well, at least now your time is no longer negative value. And then you can create a painting where you can sell that painting for $200 an hour or for $200. Okay, now your time is worth $25 an hour. But it's all dependent on what the public is willing to pay for the value you have either decreased or increased those raw materials. So maybe starting out at $30 a painting is okay. And it's okay even at the beginning if you have to sell at a loss, because it's at least subsidizing your hobby that you're trying to turn into a business, right? So even if that $100 worth of materials, if you can only sell a painting for $50, well, guess what? Now you've got $50 to go buy more art materials to create more paintings. And as you grow and get better and better and better, then your prices will go up. So there's no bottom window, I would say, because it depends on what the level the work is at now and what people value it as. The best way to figure out what to sell your paintings for, though, when you're starting out, is try to find other artists that are at the same level of their career as you are, which means very early on, emerging, and find artists where you would say, okay, well, I'm about the same level as that artist, I think. I think my work's at about the same caliber, and I think people that like that artist's work would like my work. But they have to be selling, and find out what their pricing is where people are actually buying it, and then go 20% lower. And if you've gauged that correctly, you will be the person who's the best value in that price point, and you will sell. And if you sell too fast, then you just gradually raise your prices. And if you start at $20 and you sell 3 paintings in an hour, it's like go around and reprice everything right away, price them higher. What inspired your sunlight paintings? Happenstance, serendipity. It was a fluke. I remember, so one of the galleries that I was in Whitby, he was thinking about doing a show of local artists. We had an area down by Lake Ontario called, what's it called, Cameron? The shores down there. There's like a big park area. Lind Marsh, called the Lind Marsh, and it's very famous. It's protected by Ducks Unlimited, and there's some really cool stuff down there. And so he asked me if I was interested. So I was down there taking photos, and this was in the winter time, of the Lind Marsh area, of like the water and the reeds and the marsh and kind of everything. And I was down there taking all these photos, and it was towards the end of the day. And as I was walking back through the path, the sun was going down, and I just saw the sun shining through the trees, and I just went, oh, that's kind of cool. And I literally just turned my camera and took a picture. Didn't think anything of it. And then when I went back and through my photos, and I was going to be creating something of this Lind Marsh, that photo just kept drawing me. And I just thought, there's something about that, the light shining through the trees like that. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll try painting that. And so I did. And it wasn't very good, the first one that I did. But it was like, oh, I think there's something there. And then I kind of dug deep on that. And then not too long after, probably about the second or third painting where I tried that, that was where that painting Forest Window was done. And then that was just like, oh my God, like there it is, right? If I hadn't have been walking back from that place at that time of night and taking that photo, I might never have stumbled upon it. But that's why it's also really important to always be out there open to something. Always have your camera with you. I mean, now it's great. We always have our phone, right? But yeah, it was just open. I had no thought at that time that I would be painting like sun coming through the trees or whatever. I just saw it. It reached out at that particular day, spoke to me, took the picture. I kept coming back to that picture, and I thought, well, something's calling me this. Let me try it. But that's it. It was a fluke. Do all artists use photos? I have the feeling of cheating when using photos as a template. I've seen, though, that most artists use their own photos as a template. No, not all artists use photos. Some artists paint from life. I am of the opinion that whatever it takes you to get the work on the canvas, then that's good, right? Because at the end of the day, The only thing that matters is what's on the canvas. Whether you paint it from life, whether you paint it from photos, um, doesn't doesn't really matter. The thing that's important is what is people's reaction to the painting when they see it. You know, some artists, you'll find artists out there that go, "Oh, true artists only paint from life." It's like, yeah, whatever, right? I really hate that thing about artists saying this is valid or that's not valid or whatever. It's like, hey, do whatever you want, right? If you don't want to use photos, don't use photos. But that doesn't make the work any more appealing to people, or it probably won't, right? And so the thing about photos, the big thing why you get a kick against photos a lot is if you're just rote copying the photo, then it's like, yeah, why bother? Because photography does a really good job of creating just an accurate impression of whatever it is. Ideally, you want to bring something to the process that makes it better than a photo. And the other thing that the problem with working from photos is if you work from life, you can, when you look into the highlights, your pupil contracts and you can see detail in the highlights. And when you look into the shadows, your pupil dilates and you can see detail there. Excuse me. The photo can only kind of expose for one thing, right? If you have good exposure and can see all the detail in the highlights, your shadows are going to be black. If you've got it light enough so you can see details in the shadows, then your highlights are all going to be blown out and to be white. But the way you can get around that with digital photos now is print 3 or 4 versions. And this was really important when I was doing portraits because, yeah, like people are not going to sit for 30 hours that it took me to do a watercolor portrait. And a kid, you're lucky to get a kid for 2 seconds where you get a really good shot of them. But when I had the photos, I'd work from 4 different versions of the photo. I'd have one photo and I would have all of these kind of taped down on the board beside me while I was working on the painting. I would have one photo that was pretty well exposed for everything. But then I would have another photo that was overexposed because that gave me more detail in the shadows. And then I would have another one that was underexposed because that gave me more detail in the lights. And then I would have another photo where I'd really push the saturation so that I could see in those flesh tones that just look kind of gray, which is not good. If you paint people flesh tones in grays, they look like they should be in a coffin. But so you want those grays, but you want them colorful. Is it more yellow, more red, more blue, more orange, more green? And so when you push the saturation in the photo, now you can actually see that almost like a color map. What's the color dominance within those neutral tones? So I would just say that for me, it's like whatever you need. And for me, it's like, yeah, I do paintings. Like if I'm doing a 4 foot by 6 foot painting of a sunset, I'm doing a painting of a moment that lasted about 30 seconds. There's no way I can paint that from life. So does that mean I shouldn't paint it? Well, not me. At the end of the day, you just do what you want to do. And if that's important to you, that's important. I can tell you it's not important to most people. Most people are just care about, well, what is the finished thing like? But I do hate the fact that artists get into these battles about, oh, real artists only do this or do that or whatever, or this is the only valid art. It'd be like someone in music saying that, opera is the only music or country and western is the only music. It's like, no, if you like country and western, do country and western. There's people there. If you like opera, do opera. If you like doing abstracts, do abstracts. If you like high realism, do it. There's people there. One is not necessarily better than the other. And at the end of the day, people decide. If nobody likes your work, guess what? It's not very good. Not in this village. It might appear in the modern Museum of Modern Art. Might be great work in that village. But at the end of the day, I would not get too caught up in your process of do you use photos or paint from life or whatever, because reality, most people don't care. Two-parter coming up. Okay. Okay, so I did a Zoom call yesterday with people who have bought my courses. So Jessica was on there. You did the flower fields and the vase with the shot. Yep. Okay. Yep. I remember. Do I have a tip about how you can make your flower field paintings without needing a different photo for each? Yeah, I do. So what you want to do, and so this is for people to, Jessica does these paintings of the beautiful, some of them were of like still life with flowers in a vase, but then there was also these ones in fields of flowers. But each one was kind of heavily reliant on a photo, and it's much, Jessica was saying, it's very easy for her to do a ton of photos of the still life, but difficult to get a ton of different photos of these flower fields because you need the lighting condition just right and the flowers and the fields and all that. So what I would do is the way you can get around that is to use your images just as a rough kind of inspiration point and then go in and compose, making the compositions different. And the way that works there is if you can develop almost like a visual shorthand, right? You know, there's certain ways that you did the stem, certain ways the leaves, certain ways of outlining the flower shapes and all that kind of thing. And then when you're going into your paintings, treating them almost like an abstract, but using the shorthand of more design than just copying kind of like where the placement is. Because just by moving the flowers around, right, you can create new paintings. Even something as simple as saying, like, where in this particular painting, if it's like a field of green, where you could just say, okay, well, I'm going to do a similar painting, but I'm going to gradate from a yellowy green to a bluish green as we move across in terms of what the background color of the thing is. But what you want to get into there is where you're using motifs and then you are changing it on the can. And that's what I do now. I can take one painting and make, or one picture and do 10 different paintings from it just by moving things, because I know, if I move the birch tree over here and the tree, I know how to paint that and I know how the light's going to impact it. So that's what I would do, is look at creating the elements of your paintings and those field paintings just as compositional elements, and then just changing the arrangement and the composition of those. And that way, one photo might give you 10 very different paintings, but that are all kind of in a series, but they're different enough that each one's a different painting. Okay, what's next, Cam? Artistically edited photo versus painting in value. I'm not quite sure what the question is there. Oh, okay. Well, so here's the one thing. I'm not sure if this is talking about how much to charge for a photograph as opposed to a painting, but I'm going to take, in terms of, since we're talking about working from photos, I'll tell you one thing. It's kind of like with computers. They say garbage in, garbage out. If you work from a poor photo, you need to be absolutely brilliant painter and a master of composition to turn that into a great painting. And you will have to change all of the things that are not good in the photo. So if your photo doesn't make you go, oh my God, I love it, then a painting of that photo is not going to make anybody go, oh my God, I love it. Okay, well, I'll talk about that in a second, but I do want to talk about the idea too that if you are working from photos, then you need to become a very good photographer, and even more importantly, you need to become very good at editing your photos, right? And especially now with digital photos, it's great because you can take a picture of something you really, really love, and the light effect can be just brilliant, and then you see the photo the camera gives you, and it's like, oh wow, that doesn't do it at all. Well, the thing that's important is all that information is in there. You can go in and adjust the curves, adjust the value, adjust the brightness, adjust the color saturation, all that stuff to get it back to where you want it, or often even better than what you saw there. But if you're working from a average photo that's just you're going to get an painting, unless you know what's wrong with the photo, why it's just average, know what needs to be done compositionally, and can actually go do that. So it is really worth the effort, to become very good at taking photos and editing photos, and also composition, because composition is the most important thing in a photo as well. And I guess I'll just pitch my Unstoppable Artist course before we get onto the pricing, because in my Unstoppable Artist course, there's a course called The Business of Being an Artist. There's my color and composition course. There is a course on editing digital photos for artists, how to actually create great photos to paint from, as well as how to paint how to take photos of your paintings. And then there's also creating your plan for success, which is also right now, if you buy today my book, or if you've already got the book, you can claim that bonus of that particular course. But in my Unstoppable Artist, it's all of this stuff together. So, anyways, the value of a photograph next to a painting, a painting is going to sell a lot more than a print of a photo, probably, unless you're talking about Andy Leibovitz, right? An extremely successful painters. Just because anyone can go out and take pictures, and anyone can go out and take actually pretty good pictures, and they can print them. So it's like there's a huge amount of competition out there. So to get to the point where, as a photographer, finished photos of your work are going to go beyond that decorative kind of thing into the really high price point, then you have to be, again, absolutely brilliant, and where your work just makes people go, oh my God, I love it. But it's also, there's something about it that's better than the next, or something different than other photographers that are out there. It's the same sort of thing. But the good news about it is, if you're a great photographer, you can go out and shoot 40 great photos, and the next day you can have prints of all 40 of those available, whereas it takes you a long time to paint. But that's why paintings end up selling more than photographs. And it's tough now because everybody has a camera that's even just a phone is good enough that I can do a 30 by 40 G-Clay from a picture taken from the phone, and it will look good. So is it possible to sell artwork made from two different mediums, colored pencil and acrylic paint? Yeah, for sure. That's just called mixed medium. Yeah, no problem. The one thing you just want to be aware of is that that you can paint oils over acrylic based paints, but you can't paint acrylics over oils because it won't adhere. So that's the kind of thing. It's kind of like when you go to any oil-based medium, then you can't come over top it with a water-based medium because you have adhesion problems, but you can go the other way. But yeah, you can mix in as many things as you want, and then you just call it a mixed media piece. Are there festivals towards Whitby that are good? Oh, that's a question specifically for me because I used to live in Whitby for years. There was there's a few. If you're starting out, there's a number of art festivals. I haven't done any in over 20 years, so my information may be off. But there are a number in Toronto, not necessarily in Whitby. The Queen West Art Crawl was a pretty good festival. The Oakville Art in the Park was a good festival. The Riverdale Art Walk was a good festival. The Lions Club had a show, I think, in Bowmanville or Port Hope every year that was actually pretty good. The best way to find that out is, if you're in Whitby, join your local art association. I know the Oshawa Art Association is still there. That was the first art association I joined, and I ended up being president of it for a couple of years. Join the Oshawa Art Association. It's like $30 a year. You get to go to the meetings, but the good thing is there are a number of artists in the association who are on the festival circuit. So they would be able to tell you what festivals are good now. And they also, every year, they have the Camp Samak Art Festival in Oshawa, where they get a lot of people come out. So that's a great start to start showing your work. But join the Oshawa Art Association, and then they'll be able to tell you better what's good now out there than I can. Yep. Do you need to have a YouTube channel to sell well? You do not. Yeah, you do not need to have a YouTube channel to sell well. One thing I can tell you, you need to have a YouTube channel to sell well if what you are selling is art instruction and teaching, right? But very little sales have ever come to me as a result of YouTube. I started doing YouTube years ago because that was the year actually that I made $280,000, and I just felt an obligation to give back. It was an investment in karma. I felt a responsibility to share everything I'd learned because I know so many people share the same dream. And I also know a lot of the information that they're being told is just plain wrong in my mind. And there's a lot of information that people aren't even aware of, that they don't know, that I have learned. And I thought, well, that's why I want to share. So I started doing my YouTube channel, not for any sort of purpose other than to help other artists. And I don't know anybody really that uses YouTube to generate a huge amount of sales. And you don't even need social media to do very well. If you are starting out, it will help you get to where you want to be faster, because the whole key when you're starting out is the more people that you can get your work in front of, the more feedback you will have about that third component of what is the public love, and also the more people will have the opportunity to fall in love with your work and potentially buy it, right? So if you just do art festivals, you can go and just do art festivals and end up becoming very successful. That's what I did, because I popped long before social media was a thing. I went from that art festival, the Toronto Art Festival, where I did 28,000 in sales. I also had the business cards of 10 gallery owners by the end of that festival who had all approached me and said, we love your work, would you consider showing with us? And then over the course of the next few years, I got to the point where, again, I was made $280,000 from my art, no social media. It was all just, I was at that point in about a dozen galleries and just shipping my work out to the galleries, and they were selling them. I wasn't doing festivals, I wasn't doing any of that kind of stuff anymore. The only reason I started doing social media is I started my YouTube channel because I wanted to help artists. My YouTube channel, I thought if I build it, they will come, right? I'm giving away all this free information on YouTube. I'll have 100,000 subscribers. Nope. Built very slowly. And then I realized, oh, I need to do social media to promote my YouTube channel, to tell people I'm giving away all this information for free, which I did, which helped the channel grow. But what it ended up doing is also getting me in front of a lot of people who wanted to buy my art. That led to the point where we ended up moving away from the gallery model. And now I'm only in 2 galleries, and the majority of my sales are direct to the public, but that's more Instagram and Facebook. But no, YouTube is not something you need to do. But I do know, and we have figured this out, on YouTube, long form content, I have a much better chance of actually convincing you that I have some information that might help you on your journey. Right? If I try to do it in a 60-second reel about how I'm going to help you live your dreams and become a successful artist, I sound like a snake oil salesman. And so we don't do that. I don't really do any of the teaching stuff anymore on Instagram or Facebook, because it just comes across as too snake oilsy. But if you're selling a service or teaching or something like that, then yes. But YouTube, I don't think it's ever generated a sale for me. Is what is this? Park West, the Vanity Gallery, Ethics, Sell and Reproduction. So I don't know I don't know the name of that gallery, but let's talk about what a Vanity Gallery is. There was a gallery that I used to get emails from them like twice a year. They're in Chelsea, New York, and it was like, oh, we love your work. We'd love to offer you a show, and then here's our packages. And their packages, if you pay $1,000, you get a weekend. If you pay $5,000, you get a week, and they'll show your work. That's a Vanity Gallery. That's where you have to pay to show your work. Any gallery that asks you to pay to show your work is a vanity gallery. They make their money basically by renting space to artists, and they make their money whether you sell or not, and they don't really care. And they will take an artist who has never sold a painting in the world because their art is just not good, and they will let them show there if they pay the money, and that's why it's called a vanity gallery. Any reputable gallery they make their money from selling art, and you don't pay to exhibit in a gallery that makes their money from selling art. And they only want you if they believe that they can sell your work, which is why it's very difficult to get into galleries, because it's like, why are they going to pick your work over my work, right? It's kind of like if I'm willing to show with them, and I sell a 3-foot by 4-foot for $7,000, and I sell everything I paint, they would rather have my painting there than a 3-foot by 4-foot from an artist who sells it for $2,000 and doesn't sell very much, because they're going to make more money off me. And that's why it's incredibly difficult to get into galleries. And the best way to get into galleries is, again, develop that work until you're getting the over the top reaction from the public where you're already selling well and your prices are going up. And then the galleries will come after you, which ended up happening to me. Again, at one point I was in 12 galleries across Canada. All but one of them, I was in them because they reached out to me. They'd seen my work and were interested and said, would you please consider showing with us? That's a really good dynamic, as opposed to you coming into the gallery hat in hand saying, would you please consider showing my work? But I would never show in a vanity gallery, because here's the other thing. People in the business know that. So even if you have it on your resume that you had a solo show, they're like, oh yeah, that's that place where they charge you to show your work. It doesn't mean anything. Should you post on social media your journey to becoming an artist, such as paintings, even if they're not at their best yet? Oh, that's a great question. I would say it worked out very well for an artist by the name of Brooke Cormier, right? Brooke, so I don't, again, I'm assuming most of you know Brooke. She's actually probably one of the most famous artists on social media right now in the world. She's got over 1 million followers. She's killing it. She's living in Vienna, living her dream. I mentored her for the first 2 years. She had graduated as a landscape architect, but really wanted to be an artist. And her dad was a friend of mine. We were golf buddies. And so it came about, she got to know me. She knew I was an artist. And then she told her parents, look, I don't want to be a landscape architect. I want to be an artist. And I agreed to mentor her as long as she was willing for us to film our sessions. So if you haven't seen that, I really recommend it. It's on this channel. It's called the Mentorship Series. And it follows Brooke from that very first meeting we had where she just told her parents this is what she wants to do. And we set about kind of every month we would meet. I would give her kind of suggestions and tasks to do. And by the end of that first year, she made $30,000. By the end of the second year, she was making a lot more. She was selling limited edition prints of her work internationally. Her work was selling internationally. Just amazing. But I was very clear with her right off, and her YouTube channel and her social media far outpaces, not actually not her YouTube. I think I might have her beat on YouTube. Maybe I don't. But her social media outpaced mine dramatically. She started with zero, and I had at that time, I think about 10,000 on Instagram and 10,000 on Facebook. And by the end of that first year, I was in her dust. She had like over 80,000 followers on social media, because her story was so compelling, right? By that time, I was just this old white guy who's a successful artist who's kind of, posting work and all that. We're here's this girl that's taking on this heroic journey. She's gone to university to do the safe thing, and then she said, "No, I'm not going to pursue that. I'm going to pursue my dream." And she brought everybody along for the ride. And I was very clear with her at the beginning that that's what she should be doing, that she should not be posturing as kind of being any further ahead than she was at the whole thing, and that this was a journey. And I even remember having the conversation with her. I think you can see that. I said, like, your point of view is that you're kind of scared shitless because you've made this huge commitment and choice that everyone says is not going to turn out, and it might not work out, and you're just like, you're going to do everything you can to kind of make this succeed, but you're scared, and this is a scary thing. And that's what she did. And she took people on that ride. And when she had successes, everybody else shared in those successes, and they were able to follow her along and then see. I mean, I'm so thankful that the idea just occurred to me. I'll mentor her, but I want to film this, because you really wouldn't believe how quickly she became as successful as she did. And not only that, it is a great, for the person who asked earlier, how can I make myself believe that I can do it? Just watch Brooke's journey. Because here's the thing. When she started out, she was at about the same talent level. If you went to any high school in Canada or the US and said, well, give us your top 3 or 4 students in the graduating class in terms of their artistic skill, that's where she would have been. Every high school in the graduating class has, like, yeah, they're good. They're pretty good. But it's like, how did she then take that to now live this amazing life? And you can actually see that journey unfold. You can actually even follow along with it. But I would also be broadcasting that as the journey, because that is a compelling story. And it doesn't matter where you're starting out right now, because people will see that journey of your work getting better and better and better. And isn't it great? I wish I had a lot of my old paintings so that I could show you guys how horrible I was when I was younger, right? I don't, because they all got thrown out. But yeah, start right now documenting the journey. Yeah. How many questions we got, Cam? Okay, so we're gonna quit taking questions now, and we'll just finish the last five or six. Oh, the one thing I'd say while Cam's looking for the next photo is another thing is, so again, obviously my book, today's the last day to get the book plus the bonuses. Um, I do have, like I say, my Unstoppable Artist course on the Art Academy, and there's also a link at the back of the book. And the way you would get your bonuses, because people are asking me, since if you haven't bought the book yet, if you're going to buy, if you buy the book by tonight, there's a bonuses page at the back, and it actually has a website URL. So you just type that into your browser window, hit enter, and it'll take you to a landing page where you put in your name and email, and that will register you. And I think they have to create a password then too, Cam, I think, if they don't already have an account. But that will create an account on the Art Academy, and you'll have within there that course, Creating Your Plan for Success. And then we will also be reaching out to everybody who claims the book bonuses for the live Zoom call. So that's how you get those. Tomorrow, we are going to change that URL that will go to a different page where all you'll still get a bonus and my worksheets about creating goals and objectives, but you won't get the full course and everything. So that's today. Also, though, there's a link in there where you can get discounts on some of my courses. And then we're also going to be doing if you're on my email list, we're doing a big promotion this week for my Hungry Artist community. And that's all of the courses that I have, as well as you get all the new courses that I come out with. But the most important thing about that is I do this every week with the students in my Hungry Artist community. So every week we get together, only there we do it on Zoom so they can actually share images with me, so I can do critiques of actual paintings, and you can actually talk to me back and forth. So if you aren't on my email list, you can do that through the Tim Packer Art Academy, but we'll be doing a promotion for that. And that is a subscription service where it's $495 a year. Okay, any tips for artists that paint purely from imagination, not abstract or related to nature, more Picasso-esque? Yep, be great. Uh, that's it. You know, if you can create works that are great, that people go, oh my God, I love it, I have to have it, then good. And if you can't, then that's a problem. If you're going to paint from imagination, though, I would say you really want to develop the skills to paint life, right? If you just you're just drawing and randomly making shapes, that's one thing. If you're painting actual things, but you're painting from imagination, then the higher your drawing skill and the higher your compositional skill, the better that work will be. Because at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to, right? It's got to have work that gets that over the top reaction, but there also has to demonstrate mastery of skill and composition for people to be willing to pay kind of big bucks for it. So if it's just drawn from imagination and it looks amateurish, good luck, right? If it's drawn from imagination and it shows mad skill and it has that over the top reaction, then great. But if you haven't mastered all the skills yet, then you want to do that before you start going, I'm just going to paint from imagination. Can you speak to using stock photography? I sure can. So that's where you can be things where, like, you pay your membership and you get to use photographs that are put up there by artists. I don't recommend that unless you are at the very, very beginning stage of your career and you can't take very good photos and you want to just have something half decent to draw or paint from, for a couple reasons, right? Like, you and your work, that uniqueness that is you, that becomes part of your brand. If you are working from someone else's photographs, again, I said you need a great photo to make a great painting. If you're going to go from the photo, if you're working from someone else's great photo, two things. That person's done all the work. Now it's just a matter of painting techniques to replicate what the photographer has done. That is going to diminish the value of your brand because people will care about that. People won't care about the fact that you work from photos. They will care about the fact that you're just painting what someone else did. That's what is there unique about that to you, right? Not only that, you could end up seeing multiple images of that, multiple paintings by multiple artists of that. So there's real no kind of scarcity kind of thing. But the biggest thing as well is you're cheating yourself, because if you're working from someone else who's done great compositions in their photos, and if it's in a stock photography thing, it's probably brilliantly composed. you're not having the opportunity to work those compositional muscles and master composition. You're just copying someone else's beautiful composition. So you're not growing at all. And you're also not, I guarantee you, if people become aware of the fact that you just work from other people's photographs, that will impact how much they value what you do. And so I just don't recommend it because it's like a crutch. We all do it starting out. I mean, I used to go and buy books of Canadian landscape books and do paintings from there when I was starting out, and that's fine, when you're starting out, when you're not. But once you make the decision that you're going to kind of treat this as a pro, so I guess I will. If you're just doing it as a hobby, still fine, no problem, because again, you want to work from something that gives you the best chance of having a successful painting, but you shouldn't be entering that in juried shows. And you certainly, if you're at the point where you're starting to sell your work, you should be working from your own photos, or it will really come back to bite you down the road. What's more stressful, teaching or selling art? Teaching. I miss the days. My life, there was a 10-year period where all I had to do was get up and go into my studio for 4 hours a day, and I would make over a couple $100,000 a year. If I did that 5 or 6 days a week, and I didn't even often have to ship pieces to the galleries because the galleries could never keep up with me. So the ones that were within a few hour drive, they would actually come to my home to pick up the paintings. It was wonderful. I didn't have social media. I didn't have anything. I just went into my studio 4 hours a day, for 4 or 5 hours a day, and painting, and there was literally no stress in my life. I made the decision to want to teach, not out of any sort of monetary thing, but because I just really felt that experience I had with Brooke when I mentored Brooke, that was one of the greatest experiences of my life, to be able to change someone else's life. And then in 2019, I had the thyroid from hell and I almost died twice. And kind of lying there in the gurney in the hospital, not sure if you're going to be there 10 minutes from now. You really do some soul searching. And I realized that the overwhelming feeling that I had when I thought I might be dying in the next 10 or 20 minutes was gratitude, that I was just so grateful that I'd been able to achieve way beyond my dreams. And I was just like grateful. This is it. Thank you. I mean, it's going to be hard on my boys, hard on my wife. I have a lot more I'd like to do, but I was just overcome with this feeling of gratitude. But then I realized there was one regret that came to me over the course of that year. And that was that even though I'd done the YouTube channel, and I'd invested a lot of time and effort and money, because when I started my YouTube channel, that was before smartphones. So I got $25,000 in equipment to be able to start producing the videos initially. And that was all just kind of a passion project to kind of give back to art, which had given me so much. But after, when I was sick, I realized that, it's like when you have those kind of things, it's like, what do I want? If I get better, is there anything I would do differently with my life? And I realized that, I had two choices. I could just keep doing what I was doing, cranking out more paintings and making lots of money, and even walk away from the YouTube or just do it kind of part-time. Or I could really double down and try to change as many lives as possible, and really try to grow the YouTube and actually create the Art Academy, write a book, try and help artists at scale, because I'd already known from Brooke's experience that what I had was helpful. And I thought, what do I want to do? Just crank out more paintings and make lots of money? Or do I want at the end of my life to say, okay, I didn't just change Brooke's life, I changed hundreds or thousands of artists' lives, which would be more important to me? And that was the one that I made. So then it's like, okay, I'm back to start from scratch, because the only way I can do that is to make a successful business out of the teaching. And so that has been the last 5 years. We launched the Art Academy in 2020. Learning how to do that, learning how to market that, writing the book, all of this stuff, doing these live calls. There's nothing that is as kind of satisfying for me as just standing in front of my easel and painting, in terms of the feeling of the process. But at the end result, I would rather change a lot of lives than I would just create more work. But yeah, definitely just being an artist and painting, being a successful artist, there's no stress. It's good. I mean, the only reason to want to teach, I think, is just two things. I did teach when I first started out, local workshops just to kind of augment my income. And then at a point, it got to the point I couldn't justify it because I couldn't charge for a weekend workshop what I would get for a painting that I did in a weekend. So I was losing money when I was teaching. And again, the only reason I got back into this now that I can do this at scale, right? I have students in my art academy on my Hungry Arts from around the world, and we reach each other every week on this. And I have my courses and all that. But yeah, definitely being an artist and selling work was a lot less stressful than trying to make a business out of teaching, at least for me. Yep. Oh, sure. Yeah, you can definitely sell and create work in a number of different mediums. So, and especially when you're starting out, right? So when I was starting out, again, because I mean, ideally you want to find that unique voice, right? At if you become known for like the painter who paints these amazing acrylic paintings or the artist who does these amazing colored pencil drawings, if you reach that level of creating great work with a unique voice that the public goes gaga over, you will be able to kind of go further probably if you just pick one because you become known for that thing. But on the road to getting there, you can do multiple different things, and you don't want to pick one until or unless the public tells you this is the thing we really want you to do. So when I was starting out and I was moving away from portraits and into the landscapes and the all the different stuff. If you went into my booth, you would see acrylic paintings, you would see oil paintings, you would see watercolors, you would see collage, you would see acrylic encasing, all different kind of mediums there. Because what you're trying to do is find that thing, right, where you love the process, you love the work, and the public loves it. So yeah, putting all of that stuff out there, fine when you're starting out. I actually recommend it. You don't want to pick a niche just to say, okay, I picked a niche. You basically want that niche to pick you because the public is coming at you with their wallets saying, let me buy that one, let me buy that one. But in the meantime, yeah, you could paint in 10 different mediums and exhibit them all. How would you deal with somebody disrupting my career? Oh boy, that's a that's that reminds me of my time on the police force. How would you deal with someone who's disrupting your art career? I don't know. I mean, you could. I really don't know. It depends where you are and what the laws are. Um, that it's it's kind of a nightmare. At the end of the day, if it's something you're really concerned about, then you want to just contact the police and they'll be able to tell you what, if anything, can be done. But yeah, that's a whole other thing. The one thing that you might want to do, I guess, is and this is a thing for women too, that's probably a good idea to mention, that you you ideally want your business name to be your name as well, so people know kind of who you are. So like for me, like my channel is Tim Packer Fine Arts, right? My Facebook is Tim Packer Fine Arts. The Instagram's Tim Packer Fine Arts. My website's timpacker.com. It's the Tim Packer Art Academy. Um, but you can have a pen name or a brush name, right? So I know several artists, and particularly young women as well, where you are more vulnerable or whatever. You can create like a brush name that you go by, and as the artist, that is not necessarily your real name, and you can even make that your company name. And so that would make it more difficult for people to find you or to know that that's your website or your social media. And at the end of the day, too, you don't necessarily have to show yourself on your social media. There are a number of artists that have very, very huge followings where all they show is their art. So there is that. But I would say if it's an ongoing problem, you need to contact the police and find out what, if anything, can be done. And there might be something. They might be actually breaching the stalking laws or whatever. You might be able to get a restraining order or whatever. But I would say on your social media and stuff, you might want to think about actually creating brand new accounts, but doing it under a brush name. Just know that whatever that name is, that's who you're going to be from now on as an artist. But that's not what your actual name is. So that's one option, and that's actually an option that for young women in particular, that might be an attractive thing to do anyways, just because the nature of the world and the nature of the creeps that are out there and all that. You might, again, I don't care. People know where I live or how to find me. I'm 6'2", ex-police officer. But if I was a young woman, I might be a little concerned about putting information out there that would allow the wrong type of person to track me down. So one way to do it is to create your brush name that's just kind of just like actors do, right? So that's an option there. Okay, last one. Okay, good. We were hoping to get it in and out at 2.5 hours, and we're going to do it. Yesterday was one for people who had bought my course. We went 5 hours. That was a lot. Okay. How much of finding what the public loves and wants is happenstance versus luck? Some detailed plan to work through different styles and subjects that I may enjoy painting. Yeah, so for sure. So what you want to do, right? So when you're seeking out influences, right? So you're looking for artists that's like, I want to kind of encapsulate as much of the skills, the filter, the creativity that this artist spent their whole life kind of building. I want to encapsulate that so I can draw on that. Well, choose your influences wisely, right? You don't want to choose as an influence someone who's a starving artist, right? Because then you're just going to create work that relies on the stuff that they've done that people don't like. So choose as your art, as your influences, not only artists that you love, but artists that are very successful, right? And how can you tell if they're successful? Well, if they're being shown in the very top high-end galleries, right? Like John Pence Gallery is a good example down in, I think it's San Francisco, probably one of the top galleries of representational painters in kind of the US, right? If an artist is showing in that gallery, it's because the gallery knows that their clientele, who are very high level clientele, will buy that artist's work. So choose artists whose work is in very high end galleries, or choose artists. And the one thing I would say about learning from influences, one of the best ways to learn from an influencer is to actually take a workshop with them where they teach you their process and you get into their thought processes and all of that kind of stuff. And so, well, who are you going to choose as influences? Well, again, you want to look for artists who are very successful, but who are also very successful at teaching, because some artists are really good painters, but don't teach very well. Some artists are really good teachers, they're just so-so painters. You want to find artists that excel at both, but then you look at, well, where are you going to find that? One of the best places, I think, I've never been there, I just know the caliber of artists there, and I still is the Scottsdale Artist School in Scottsdale, Arizona. And what you want to be learning from there is they bring in teachers who are the top plein air landscape teachers, pastel portrait artists, whatever. These are artists who are extremely, extremely successful as painters, but who also teach. And they teach workshops, and they typically, most of their money is made from their paintings, but they also like to teach. Because that's the one thing I'll tell you that I've found. Let's finish on this note, is that most people who love art are really wonderful. Most people who love art are the type of people you as an artist would like to hang around with. And there's enough of the really nice people that we don't have to suffer the a-holes, right? There are some of those, and those, the pretentious, so-and-sos are the people who, someone who critiques work and just tears the artist down because they just makes them feel good to make someone feel lesser than, right? There are those people out there, but they're few and far between in my experience. And the one thing I have found is that whole amount of pretentiousness and you know what I'm talking about, the bad stereotype of artist, that's usually an inverse proportion to that person's skill and success. Usually what I have found, the more skillful and successful an artist is, the more they feel like I do, that this thing, art, has given them a wonderful life, and they know that other people share that desire. And so they're often very willing to reach out and help out other people as well. And so, again, those people that are teaching at the Scottsdale Artist School or the Art Students League of New York, you know, that are actually working successful artists, but that are teaching workshops. That's the kind of people, if you're going to take workshops, you're better off. Once you get to a certain level, I mean, when you're beginning, you'd be taking the local watercolor workshop with the local person at your local high school in the evening classes. That's fine. But when you're kind of getting on that journey to mastery, then you want to learn from the very best. And so you want artists that have actually not only become successful as painters, but are also very successful as teachers. And so you go to the best places, right? And so Scottsdale Artist School. And the great thing about that is just, if you just go on the Scottsdale Artist School thing and look who's taught there in the last 20 years, that's a list of people that, okay, a lot of them also might teach workshops where you are or where you can get to, but anyone that's taught at the Scottsdale Artist School is really at the highest level. But you just search out other people who are very successful, whose work you also love. That's the short answer, I guess, that I made long. Okay, that's it, Cam. Okay, so thank you everyone for showing up here. And so yeah, like I say, if you haven't already bought my book, if you buy it by midnight tonight, you get over $200 in bonuses with it. If you wait till tomorrow, the price goes up and you don't get those bonuses. At the back of the book, there's also a link to get my courses at a discount. And if you aren't already following, if you aren't already, I'm terrible at that, but if you aren't already, you can push the subscribe button, hit the bell if you want to get notified when I come out with a new video. And yeah. Oh, and if you read the book and you love it, if you could do a review, that would help, because that really helps promote the book with the Amazon algorithm. So just leave an honest review. I would really appreciate that. And other than that, I thank you for your time. Hopefully I will see some of you in the Art Academy and maybe in the Hungry Artist community. Bye-bye.